Welcome to Get Your Bell Rung, Pro Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, KG, and with me I have a man tonight that, they say never meet your idols or those that you looked up to as a child because you'd be disappointed. And I have to honestly say that I've gotten to know this gentleman fairly well, and he has never disappointed me. He's a guest who has been in the ring with some of the biggest names in the business, a guy who made them look like $1 million every single time, the one, the only, the Hall of Famer, the best punch in the business, the cooker, Bob Cook. Welcome, Bob. How are you?
I appreciate you having me on the show to talk about my illustrious, non-illustrious career, and thank you for that introduction. And I've been disappointed myself every day, so it's pretty ironic that you've never been disappointed in me.
Yeah, now, for those who may not know, Bob is a regular on the podcast on Tuesday nights. He is my special guest host. And we always have great time on Tuesday nights, so please subscribe to the channel. But let's get into it. I want to know about your humble beginnings. Now, I'm not talking about your humble beginnings as a pro wrestler. I want to know more about baby Bob Cook.
Oh, no.
What was your childhood like?
I'm going to have to brag. It was the best childhood ever. You know, I was adopted. I'll be the first to say that. When I was an infant, I guess my teen mother didn't want me. Hey, shocking. What are you going to do? Teen mothers. We won't get into that. But, and my parents let me know I was adopted as soon as I was able to understand. It's nothing they ever hid from me. And I always had an opportunity to meet my real mother. My mother would tell me, if you ever want to know about her, we got the information. I said, I don't care. You're my parents. That's all that matters to me. And they were just wonderful people, both of them. Neither one of them ever drank. My dad smoked too much. That's what put him in the grave too early. Died in my arms with blood shooting out of his mouth. We won't go there yet, or I'll start crying already. But yeah, it was a great childhood. My dad owned auto parts stores, so I'm not bragging, but we didn't lack for stuff when we were a kid. I would say we were spoiled. But they say never spoil your kids. But I was never a kid who grew up hating my parents. I didn't talk back to them. I never smoked when I was a kid. I never drank when I was a kid. I never got in trouble. The cops didn't knock on the door at 2 a.m. and say, what's this 12-year-old doing stealing hubcaps? I was a good kid. When my parents told me to be home before dark, guess what? I was home before dark. Anyways.
Yeah, and by the way, to the guests who are listening, please feel free to ask questions. Now, if you want to join in with your questions, the best place to watch this is YouTube. For whatever reason, we are on Facebook. It's live as well, but I don't get all of the comments or questions from Facebook all the time. So please go and you'll see us live on YouTube. It might be easier if you just click on my channel. You can find that on Facebook. Subscribe, and it'll bring you right to this podcast. Tell me about your school days. Were you good in school? Were you someone? Judy said you're getting bad echoes if you're on YouTube. Yeah, I'm not sure. I apologize.
I don't hear them.
Yeah, I don't hear the echoes either. But in school, did you do well in school? Were you someone that was involved in sports?
I never played sports in school. In fact, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I had ROTC the last 4 years of my high school years, because if you took ROTC, you didn't have to participate in PE. That's how much I hated sports. Although you used to do really cool things with ROTC. You used to go on field trips, went to Cape Canaveral, had lunch on a submarine. It was fun stuff.
Now, your interest in professional wrestling, is this something you discovered on your own? Did you discover it because of your dad? Family members?
No, my dad never liked wrestling. I lived in Michigan the first 11 years of my life, and we moved to Florida in 1975 after my dad had open heart surgery, and the doctors advised him to get out of the cold climate. And unfortunately, he listened. I say unfortunately because he regretted it the rest of his life. It was never the same, leaving everybody behind in Michigan. But anyways, he did that, and we came, and I met a kid named Dale Dibler. I always like to bring that up because I remember his name, and he's a Facebook friend still, so he's still breathing like the rest of us at the moment. His name was Dale Dibler, and we were playing basketball one Saturday evening, close to evening, and he said, "Hey man, I got to go home." I said, "What do you mean you got to go home? It's light out. We still got time to play." He goes, "I'm going home and watch wrestling." And I was like, wrestling? You watch that stuff? Because I was always told, it's all fake, it's silly, blah blah. And I had run across it occasionally in Michigan, the big time wrestling with the Sheik, which I wish I would have got into it then, knowing later what it was about, because it was cool stuff. But I went home with Dale and I fell in love with it instantly. Terry Funk was going crazy. Gordon Solie was calling the action, and I thought I discovered the greatest thing of all time, and couldn't for the life of me wonder why no one else didn't watch it. Not no one else, but why everybody didn't feel the same way.
Yeah, no, I know that you and Terry Funk became very close. Who was your other idols or inspirations in professional wrestling?
Well, I had a lot of favorites. As a kid growing up, my favorites, I could say my top 5 favorites of all time was Terry Funk, Jerry Lawler, Harley Race, Superstar Billy Graham, and Ric Flair. Those are like the absolute top 5, growing up.
Right.
Flair later on, but the other ones at the beginning.
Yeah. How old were you when you decided this is something you wanted to do?
Right as soon as I started watching, I was
Really?
like, man, I got to do this someday. And you go back, you look at your old high school yearbooks and stuff. Before I got to Florida, all my high school yearbooks were signed like to the next Evel Knievel, because I was always a big Evel Knievel fan, and he was the bulk of my childhood, from like 68 to 70. Well, my entire childhood, but in Michigan, to 75. So all the yearbooks were just like to the next Evel Knievel, blah, blah, blah. Don't kill yourself on the bikes, whatever. And then years later, as in Florida, all the yearbooks were signed to the next wrestler, the next world champion. Sorry, the dogs are barking. I'm going to go. Where's my gun?
Don't worry.
They're not my dogs. They're my wife's dogs.
Back to your parents. Did your parents expect you to go to college when you graduated from high school? And how do they feel when you finally said, I want to do this professional wrestling thing?
They never pushed it. And I think, one of the reasons is, like I said, my dad had the opener. He had to retire. He ended up selling his businesses to his business partner, who ripped him off and everything, because he was very ill at that time, going through the open heart surgery and all the other things when he moved to Michigan. Thankfully and strangely, the business is still owned by the same guy, Wayne Foote, and it's still in business today. It was a B&W Auto Supply, stand for Bob and Wayne. And my kid sent me a picture of, look, this is it today, and it still exists, which is really cool. But they never really, I think it's just more that I wanted that wrestling. I talked about the wrestling, which I should have went to college. Obviously, I wouldn't be a moron sitting here talking about my failed wrestling career. I'd be talking about maybe doing something. But the point is, where am I? I'm drifting. Can't think what I was going to say. Oh, yeah. My dad, he was just very ill when he lived in Florida the whole time. Then he got lung cancer, and it was just taking care of him, taking him to the VA hospital, because he was at not World War II, the Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't see combat. He worked on tanks, which is kind of cool when you think about it.
Yep. Now, you were very fortunate, in my opinion, because you didn't just get trained by, some average professional wrestler trainer. You got trained not just by a legendary individual, but by a legendary family. Who I'm talking about is the Malenko family. How in the world were you able to link up with those guys?
That was 100% luck, because, for 30 plus years, they had wrestling at the Armory in Tampa every Tuesday night. It was part of the Championship Wrestling from Florida Territory Legacy Legend. And one Tuesday night, I had moved to Tampa with a friend of mine named Wesley Stillwagon, who we're not friends anymore. Believe it or not, religion separated us. Is religion supposed to divide you? I don't get it, but it did. The point is, after I graduated from high school, Wes moved to Tampa to become an electrician. I moved with him with the idea and the hope to become a wrestler. I had no idea how I was going to do it, because, I Googled it. Nothing came up. It's weird. 1981. But so I moved to Tampa, but I moved there hoping to get into wrestling, only knowing that they did the TV tapings at the Sportatorium in Tampa, which I had been to maybe once or twice. And what a dump that was. When you saw it on TV all those years and you finally go and see it, you're like, holy crap, the magic of television. But it was such a legendary place. I mean, if the walls could talk, they'd probably be in jail, considering some of the things were on there. But so I moved to Tampa with Wes to become a wrestler, and I just happened to be. And at first, I went to the Sportatorium, and after a TV tape, and I talked to an older wrestler named Gordon Nelson, who I got to know later on. He was very good wrestler, a shooter, as they say. Very respected in the business. And at that time, he was still wrestling, but he was also helping set the rings up. And then later years, he was part of the ring crew with Klondike Bill and some others in WCW. But I asked Gordon, I said, how do you get in the wrestling business? I was only 18 years old. And he said, well, you got to come in and try out, but you got to be in really good shape. And I thought, oh, okay. I didn't realize at that time that meant, like Bob Roop or somebody would stretch you. Luckily, I didn't go back to have to find out because, again, the next week, Wes and I are coming out of the Armory in Tampa, and there's a flyer on my car, or his car, a flyer, by the way, that I still have to this day, that said, become a pro wrestler, make big money, travel the world, become a TV star. It was for the Great Malenko School. And I called it the next day, and I went down there, and I talked to a guy named Karl von Stroheim, who was a former NWA World Champion with Kurt von Stroheim in the 70s and 60s, whatever. And he was Malenko's partner. And what it was at a mattress factory in Tampa that still built mattresses in the front. It was an old mattress factory, but in the back was two rings, a full-size ring and what they'd call a low boy today. Maybe they called it then too, I don't know. But the place was not the greatest accommodations, right? You had probably Goodwill couches, holes in the floor, holes in the ceiling, but the training, man, was as good as you can get. And I got to meet Malenko the next week and started training. And, I love the Great Malenko like a father.
Yeah.
And I want to start crying.
Nope. Hey, man. Emotions are good.
Are they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell that to the guy that just cut his wife's head off and dragged her out of the house.
I mean, certain
emotions that did it. Emotions did it. Shouldn't have caught him with that other guy, but it happens. It happens. We understand his plight.
I've had quite a few indie wrestlers on here who's trained, in the past 5 years. And one thing that has really amazed me is how different the training is today, because a lot of these guys will talk about that training wasn't too difficult versus guys from your era. And even in the early 90s, I have a friend of mine that went to Shawn Michaels school, and all of those guys talk about how brutal the training was. They talked about getting stretched. They talked about how the ropes either bruised them or ripped off their flesh. How was your training? Was it that harsh training? And if so, was there a time you ever thought about being done because of how difficult it was?
No, because of my trainer. And the training was difficult because professional wrestling, contrary to popular belief, is difficult. It's hard on the body. The bumps hurt. The ropes hurt. It takes a lot out of you physically and mentally. But the training, Malenko never stretched you. He could have, sure. He never brow beat you. He never showed you that he was a badass, even though he was. He treated you with respect. He showed you the art of the business from beginning to, from the very beginning. He told me how it was and explained the things to me that needed to be explained. But he never beat me up. What did beat me up was the ring, and maybe some of the guys that weren't as a little greener than me. By default, they beat you up by accident, but just the bumps alone. I mean, they hurt, and a lot, especially with training. I tried to explain that to some of the guys that I was training earlier this year. Was the worst part about training is training, because it's the repetition. Every week you got to keep doing the same thing over and over, the same bumps over and over, and you learn another move as you go. You can't learn them all at once, but you got to make sure you remember the move you learned last week. And that's what Malenko did. He'd show you a couple moves, you practice them over and over and over. Next week, show you something else. But the point I'm trying to make is I never thought about quitting, because every single time I left that place, I couldn't wait to get back to learn more from him, because he wasn't just a wrestling trainer. And I say this about him all the time. He was a mentor, a father figure, a friend. He was the answer man. If I had any problems in my life, whether it was financial, marital, whatever, he had the answer for me. And whether I took the advice is another question or another story or whatever, but he had the answer because he'd been a guy who'd lived a life, right? He'd been divorced. He'd been successful. He'd been on the downside of his career. He'd been a star. So he had the answer for however you were feeling. So anytime I spoke to him when I was down or just needed advice, I felt like I could take on the world. And that's the God's honest truth. I say that on every podcast I do, but it's the truth. And I'll never forget the last thing he said to me, and the last time I spoke to him in 1994, just before he passed away. And I think about him at some point during the day, every single day of my life.
Yeah. How long were you in wrestling school before you were ready to have your first match?
I can't say. I can't. It's been so many years. I can't
Yeah.
remember. I started in right around my 18th birthday in 1981, and had my first match. I think at the end of the year or early 82. I'm not. A lot of people know the exact date. I knew who I wrestled. A guy named Will. He was the Masked Terror. We were in the opening match, and it was a show that Malenko had put on at a Moose Lodge in Tampa. And the ring was set up outside by a lake, and the people sat around in lawn chairs, and I got paid $20 on all the food I could eat.
Wow.
But the next week, and I was in the opening match, but the next week I was at a high school show and I was in a main event, me and a guy named Lord Tom Laxton against the great Malenko's sons, Joe Malenko and Dean Malenko. Now, how cool is that? I got $50 for that.
Wow. Wow. How was it being in the ring with both Joe and Dean? I mean, I have to imagine that even though you were trained by the Malenko family, there still had to be that intimidation factor that you were in the ring with two guys who are, at least I consider, two of the purest professional wrestlers out there.
I can't say I ever felt intimidated because they'd come by to school and work out with you, so you were familiar with them, and you knew they weren't going to hurt you because that was not what their father taught them. You knew they could hurt you, so you would do what he taught you with them, so they wouldn't want to hurt you.
When I say intimidated, I mean intimidated in the fact that you just did not want to disappoint these guys.
Oh, sure, that for sure. Because they're two of the best ever, and I'm not just saying that because Joe might be watching. I'm saying it because it's the God's honest truth. I mean, they were just that good. You go back and watch their matches in Japan with the Bulldogs, the Funks. I mean, it's incredible stuff. It's pro wrestling as pro wrestling should be presented. It's not thumbtacks and light tubes. It's professional wrestling. It's professional wrestling as real wrestling fans view professional wrestling, not as non-wrestling fans view professional wrestling as a clown and pony show like the thumbtacks and all the ridiculousness they do nowadays.
Right. Now, and I've got to know that you're pretty damn hard on yourself. So I don't know if I'm going to get this answer or not. But if there is an answer, how many matches do you remember that you had before you had that one match where you just like, man, I got this. Like I'm good.
I can't answer that. I really don't know. I just know people that I had the opportunity to work with, like a guy named Oscar Ledoux, who was also trained by Malenko. Crazy guy, but in a good way. And he was so much fun to work with that's when you know you made it because you're having absolute fun. You're not, I always got nervous before I wrestled because I always felt if you didn't get nervous, you didn't care. So and I'm not saying, well, I was nervous because I care. I just believe because I did care that I was nervous. I didn't want to mess up. I didn't want to hurt who I was wrestling. I didn't want to make a fool out of myself like I've done many times in real life. And I would always obviously try my best, but Oscar was so much fun. So I think back on guys like that, like Oscar, who I wish I knew if he was still alive. Because he was just so much fun to be around and so much fun in the ring. We had all kinds of crazy matches, bull rope matches and bunkhouse matches, and all I got from those now are just pictures. I really don't have a lot of memories of the matches other than I know they're fun. And I know that Joe Malenko commented the other day, I posted or sent him a flyer. Dr. Red Roberts is another Malenko alumni and one of the funniest people you'd ever want to meet. Me and Dr. Red teamed up against the Malenkos in the main event on a show, probably in 1985 or something. And I sent Joe and I said to Joe, do you remember this? I don't. And he goes, no, I don't remember, but I know it was fun. So he knew that, you know what I'm saying? We don't remember the specific match, but because of who's in the match, that it was fun. And I always felt if you're not having fun, maybe you shouldn't be doing it because you're hurting yourself for nothing if it's not fun.
I got to meet Joe Malenko out in Vegas. And I'm not a guy who ever gets nervous about speaking to anybody. That's just not me. But when he was willing to speak to me, there was that little bit of nervous there, just because people like to talk about the Bret Harts and a lot of those other guys. That don't get me wrong, those guys are great, but Dean and Joe, man, they were just, as you said, they were professional wrestling, just incredible. They seemed like they're perfectionists. And I never met the guy, but once you start doing the interview, he made me feel so comfortable because he joked around with me. And I mean, just a really, really good guy. He is.
That's Joe. He's a funny guy. He's one of those, just a funny guy, and
Yeah.
he was trained by Carl Gott, so he's a funny guy who can
Oh,
be not funny when he wants to. If you know what I mean.
yep, yep, yep. So eventually, you got to be known as a guy who, as I said at the beginning when I was introducing you, as the guy who made people like Ric Flair, Sting, and so many other guys who are legends today just look phenomenal in the ring. Without a Bob Cook, those guys would have become who they became. After saying all of that, though, there are other guys who were considered enhanced talent or jobbers who take offense to that.
Oh,
Is that something that bothers you if someone described you? Oh, well, yeah, Bob Cook was a jobber or someone who was an enhanced talent. Like, what goes through your mind when you hear that?
I actually don't like those words, and I can be considered nitpicky or whatever. You can say, "Ah, you think you're somebody." No, I know my position in the wrestling. I know what it was. But I consider myself a professional wrestler because when I trained at the Great Malenko School, he didn't teach me anything different than he taught someone else like Fred Altman, who went on to become a big star. It's all luck of the draw, being in the right place at the right time. And I had opportunities given to me by different people, Kevin Sullivan, Dusty Rhodes, and I blew each one myself. So any opportunities that I didn't take advantage of and succeed at, where it's my own doing, no one else's but mine, unlike Bret Hart, who wouldn't have become anything he did become if it wasn't for his father, whether he wants to admit it or not, doesn't appreciate a damn thing he's got. But that's just what I see from the outside looking in. But
Right.
and I have no bitterness towards my wrestling career, if you want to call it that. I had nothing but the best time of my life. There's times where I legitimately would just lay in bed and think about the times I had and cry.
Mm. Now, this is going to seem like a dumbass question. And believe it or not, it's a question I would have never asked until I started talking to professional wrestlers. And I've been surprised by some of the things they said. So I'm going to ask you this question. Did you ever want that big breakout moment, that big push in your career? Or do you feel like, you had that big push, that breakout moment because of how important you were at making these guys look good?
I don't know. Like I said, I had my opportunities and I blew every one. So maybe I secretly didn't want the success I possibly could have had. I think back on all those years, though, and what means the most to me now are people that I was around that meant something to the business in the eyes of the fans, like Arn Anderson and Ron Simmons and the Malenkos, Joe and Dean and Steve Kern and Brian Blair. And they all speak very highly of me, and that means the
Mhm.
world to me. Now, what do they really mean it or not? It might be a rib, it might just be a big rib on the cooker. Hey, let's tell the cooker he was good. Maybe he'll believe it. Ha ha. No, but the reality is that means more to me than anything. I've never cared what the fans think. If you're a fan or you liked what I did, hey, awesome. But if you didn't or you think I was just a jobber, then hey, that's what it is. But the people that mean the most to me are the people I love, and that's the boys and the girls. Leilani Kai, she loves the hell out of me, and I love the hell out of her. And people like that mean more to me, and their opinions mean more to me than anything a fan could ever say. Unless the fan said he was a big fan and wants to send me a bunch of money, well, then I might take that back.
And I told you just not long ago in private when we were speaking on the phone. You know, I agree with what you said. I don't consider you someone that is, just a job or a hands talent because there are people like me that your career directly influenced. I had trouble in my childhood. You're someone that I viewed as a kid as, man, this guy keeps on coming back no matter how many times he gets knocked down. Um, is this something that you truly took pride in? The fact that you were so good at making those guys look good, the fact that people to this day talk about how great of a seller you were.
I don't know if I say I take pride in it. All I did was what I did, what I was taught, what I was trained to do, and what I love. So every time I went out there, unless it was a couple times when I didn't do what I should have, there was a guy, I could tell you that story. It's kind of funny, but
Go ahead, share some stories.
uh,
Whatever you want.
I don't want to say his name because he was a boxer in real life,
That's
so he
fine.
might get mad. But in WCW, there was a time when a lot of the guys that were going to get tryouts, they'd go through me, not go through me, but they would put me in the ring with them to see how they like Sean Waltman. Went on to become
Mhm.
X
What you-
Pac and
yeah.
different names, 1, 2, 3 Kid, and he's been a friend ever since. I was friends with him when he was just a kid. He used to go to shows with me, and he's another Malenko alumni. Proudly, he was at a Malenko's funeral, uh, as he should have been. But he requested me when he got a tryout for WCW in 1990, whatever it was, 2-1, I don't know. But I've had tryout matches with people, and I always do my best to make them look good because that's my job. And most of the time, you talk about like with Arn Anderson, they don't need my help. I just went out there and did what I was trained to do, and if it came off good, then awesome. Because I should, because Malenko trained me. But there was this one guy, he was getting a tryout at WCW, and Magnum TA and Mike Graham were sitting in the office. They're the guys that would tell you who you're working a lot of the times. I went in there, and he's in there. They're in there with this guy, and they said, "Hey, this is Bob. He's the guy having a tryout match." And Mike spoke up. And he said, "Bob's the one who should be getting a tryout for a full-time job, but he's going to be your guy today." And everybody else, and I did Buff Bagwell too, even though Buff disputes whether I was his tryout match. But I was specifically told when I worked with Buff the first time in a dark match in Atlanta at the center stage that it was Buff's tryout match. Now, he may have had more than one tryout. I'm simply telling him what, but we had such a good match. When we came back, we did a finish off the top rope thing with blah, blah, blah. Arn Anderson went, "Oh, hell of a match, guys. I'm stealing that finish." So we knew we did good. But this guy, and again, everybody treated me with respect. This Buff Bagwell always treated me with respect the day of the tryout and beyond. And always had a great time with matches with him. Of everybody in the business that I've wrestled, was him and Ricky Steamboat that sold my punch better than anybody. I mean, Buff would do like a 360 spin around. It was awesome. But this guy, I'll tell you his name. His name was Derek Dukes. He was he was in AWA. He's a black guy, which doesn't matter. It's just what he was. Okay, calm down, people. And everybody thinks about race. 2025, get over it. But he was in the dressing room, and he wasn't showing me the same respect that, he was just acting like, I want to do this. So I got in the ring and I ate him up. If you're trained properly, you're trained to go with the flow. And back in those days, we didn't talk about what we were going to do. We didn't practice the match beforehand the whole time. You might know maybe an opening spot, and then the finish, and that's it. And you go in the ring and just do it. And I always did a thing where I would lock up with somebody if they didn't do something. I just do this thing with a headlock, or hammerlock, drop toe hold, float to the face, and then they would get my arm in a hammerlock, and I'd get up and I'd reverse it into a schoolboy, and they'd arm driving, whatever. But you never talked about that stuff. You just do it, right?
Right.
So you're taught to just kind of go with the flow. So I locked up with this guy, and he's not doing nothing. So I just did that. Boom, boom, boom. And he'd get up and get me in a hammerlock, and I'd reverse it, and he wouldn't do what he should do. So I just cut him off. And I kept cutting him off, and I kept reversing things. And I wasn't doing it. I was doing it to be a dick, I'll be honest with you, because he was showing me no respect, right? He acted like he didn't appreciate that I was going out there to do my best to make him look good in the eyes of Mike and Steve and Dusty, whoever he had to impress to get his job. And so he'd do something on me and I'd just reverse it. It wasn't shooting on him or nothing. That's not what wrestling is. And I would never do that. That certainly wasn't the case. I was simply reversing moves, taking advantage of him not doing things he should have, cutting him off when he could have cut me off. And I would have went with, right? If he would have cut me off, I'd have went with his thing, but he wouldn't. And so I just kept cutting him off. And when I came back to the dressing room, Mike Graham looked at me and goes, "Bob, I know what you did out there." And I said, "I'm sorry, Mike." He goes, "That little fucker deserved it." Because Mike knew. So there you go, Derek Dukes. I know you're a boxer, but guess what? The story's out there.
JT Storm, and thanks, JT, who was also on our podcast. The guy that is
that guy's still alive. That guy's still alive.
He's still alive, guys.
Let me call the Undertaker.
He wants to know what promotion gave you your first break as a main event roster.
Oh, main event. No one ever did that. Well, probably, Malenko had shows that he would could he find a money mark here and there, they would start TV shows and sorry. Hang on a second. Let me cut off this mic for a second. Hello?
Yep.
Anyways, Malenko he'd find it's true, right? Money marks, and he'd get a guy. He'd start a TV show, and he started a TV show. I think it was in '82. It was called IWWA Wrestling, and that's the first time I ever was on TV. The first match I ever had was against a guy named Louis Stay under a hood as El Tigre. Awesome guy, the man of 1,000 gimmicks. Louis was.
Yep.
He's the guy I got my Match Superstar mask from years ago. But anyways. Obviously years ago, everything's years ago, right? But on that show, because Malenko was involved, anytime Malenko was involved in the show, I always had a nice spot. It wasn't necessarily the main event. Sometimes it was. I don't care. I never cared about that stuff, right? I just liked being part of the show because every spot has to be filled. You got to have a first match, second match. Got to have a main event. They got to be filled, right?
Yep.
You just do your
Yep.
best, show up on time, do what you're told, leave your ego at home, and have fun. Otherwise, why?
Right.
Flip burgers at McDonald's. At least you got the free burgers. But
Uh,
anytime Malenko would have shows, I would be in a decent spot. And I'd tell you the first place I was ever really pushed to the main event was in '89 when Malenko called me out of the blue and he said, "Hey, this guy named Henry Raines wants to start running a show in Bradenton, Florida. We're going to call it Suncoast Pro Wrestling." Henry owned comic book stores, and so he was going to fund a TV show. And Malenko said, "I want you to be the top heel as the Masked Superstar. And I want you to feud with my son Joe or Dean." And I said, "What, are you crazy? I don't want to do that." I'm just kidding. I said, "Yes, sir. I'd be happy to do it." And that's why a lot of people ask me, "Go, you were the Masked Superstar. You stole the Superstar's gimmick." No, the great Malenko asked me to do something, and out of respect for him, because I respected him as much as anybody who ever walked the face of the earth, I did it, and I had the time of my life. I'm feuding with Dean Malenko in the main events on these TV shows. I'm doing interviews. I'm doing this. I'm doing color commentary. I'm having a time of my life. You know what I got paid for all that, though? This is the funny part. I got paid $20 a show.
wow.
And all the wrestling magazines I could get from Henry's store, because besides the comics that he sold, he had every wrestling magazine every month. So on the way to the show, TV tapings, I'd stop by Henry's store and I'd go, doot, 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 and I'd pick up, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the wrestlers, all the wrestling magazines. And I'd get to the show, I'd do my match. He'd throw me $20 out for the show. And I was the main event, baby.
Now, JT also wants to know: have you ever worked with Charlie Fulton, and what's your thoughts?
No, I never worked with Charlie. I know who he is, obviously, but no, I never worked with Charlie. But again, I was in Florida wrestling, championship wrestling from Florida, which was one of my main goals, right? Because that's what I grew up watching. And again, I got lucky to get on championship wrestling from Florida. Malenko at the time I'm going off the rails here, I know, but
No, go ahead.
I'm doing what I told you I wouldn't do.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
But Malenko at the time had two schools. He had one in Tampa and he had one in Plant City. A guy was actually one of the Money Mark who had the TV show for a while. He had a barn outside his house, open face, and he had a ring in there. And on the weekends, sometimes we'd go by there and train. And I was there one Sunday morning, and Louis Estea, Louis, again, is the guy I had that first match on TV with. But Louis would always come by to school with Malenko's and train. But Louis worked for Championship Wrestling from Florida. But he would come by to school and he would do a lot of Malenko's indie shows, even though Florida wrestling didn't appreciate you doing that. But Lewis had tons of different masks and different gimmicks, so they didn't care,
right?
Or they didn't know. I don't know which. But Lewis was there that Sunday morning. It was like 11 in the morning, and Lewis came by to school in Plant City. It was all, once again, luck of the draw. And he goes, "Hey, we need somebody in Orlando tonight for Championship Wrestling from Florida, because every Sunday night at the Eddie Graham Sports Complex in Orlando, they had wrestling." And I said, "Oh man, I'll do it." And he goes, "All right." But I had to drive all the way home. I was like 2 hours from Plant City, which is where the schools were. I drove 2 hours one way up and back to school every week. Twice a week.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you a question about that. So Jody, I'm assuming it's Joe Malenko, said, "I was pure." Yes, sir. You were absolutely one of the purest pro wrestling in my opinion.
No nonsense.
Out there. Absolutely.
Joe Malenko could be one of the funniest people you'd ever meet outside the ring, but the bell rings. I remember, Joe and I did a match. Joe came out of retirement for me. I'm going off the rails again, but Fred Altman had a company. He started a wrestling school in Tampa. It's called Legends of Professional Wrestling School. And he was doing a tournament for his tag team championship, Fred's tag team championship. And I just put it out there because I was like, "Hey, anybody out there want to team with me? I want to get in this tournament." And Joe stepped up and he said, "I'll do it." I was like, "Holy crap, really, Joe?" So he did that. We had the match there. And then Joe put on a show at the Armory, or a show to raise money to build a wall of fame at the Armory in Tampa that is now a Jewish youth center, but just to honor the wrestling history, which I'm proudly on that wall, actually.
Yeah.
But he put together a benefit show at the Armory in Tampa for the first time in decades. And Joe and I teamed up in that match, but Joe's no nonsense. I have a manager, my friend Darlene, who would come to the ring with me. And Joe's like, I don't want no disrespect, but I don't want no managers. I don't want no, tomfoolery, because that's not Joe. So that was the point of that story. Right. Joe's no nonsense.
Yep.
Either that or he just doesn't like Darlene. Darlene, I'm sorry.
You talk about, in the beginnings, making $20 here, making $20 there. how were you surviving back then, as far as food, taking care of yourself?
Well, for the first few years, I was still living at home. I was doing the wrestling and living at home, and then I got a job as a security guard, which, by the way, one of the best jobs I ever had. It was so easy. I used to sit in a shack and let old people into their overpriced housing area. I actually got fired from that job because of wrestling.
Really?
I
Was
got
it paid
fired
by
from 2 jobs because of wrestling. I worked at Wendy's after I graduated from high school for literally a month. The worst job I ever had. I never ate their chili again after I saw how they had it made. And I used to love their chili.
Yeah,
But I got fired from there because I wanted to go home and watch wrestling on a night when my boss said, "This is." Can I explain to you how much I love wrestling? Back in
sure.
those days, Championship Wrestling from Floor would air on Saturday nights on WTOG and 44 out of Tampa or out of St. Pete, right? 7 o'clock, and I'd watch that show. Sunday mornings at noon, it would air on Channel 40. I'd watch the same show I watched Saturday night. The next week, Friday nights at midnight, it would air again on Channel 40. I'd watch the show. The next day on Saturday at 2 o'clock on Channel 20 out of Fort Myers, the same show would air because they're all syndicated across the state. I'd watch it again because you didn't have VCRs back then.
Right.
So when I was working it was a Friday night, and my boss at the Wendy's goes, "Hey, how'd you like to make some extra money for that wallet of yours?" And I was like, well, I don't know. And he said, "Well, can you help us close the store?" Because I was supposed to get off at like 8 or 9 or whatever. And I said, "Well, no, I want to go home and watch wrestling because not at midnight." He goes, "Oh, well, okay." And then he just scratched my name off of any more. I was like, hey, I hated the job anyway. A cool shirt though. I got to keep the shirt. It was cool.
Mhm.
But
Now,
then I got fired for wanting to go watch WrestleMania in 1985 from the security job.
wow.
Remember the first WrestleMania was on closed
Yeah.
circuit TV. It was going to be
Yeah.
airing in Lakeland, Florida at the Lakeland Civic Center. And I asked my boss, I said, "Hey, I want to, this WrestleMania thing's happening. I want to get tickets." And go ahead. You can have off. I asked for it off like weeks in advance. I bought the tickets, and the day before the show, he says, "Hey, I need you to come in tomorrow." I said, "I can't do that. It's WrestleMania." He goes, "Well, you got to make up your mind. It's either WrestleMania or your job." I said, "Well, it's WrestleMania, baby." And my friend Wesley Stillwagon, the guy that I was with when I or got to Great Millennial School, we went and watched it on a screen smaller than we have in a living room now, basically. With the thousands of other people in this big arena. But anyways, that's that story. I got fired for wanting to watch wrestling.
JT wants to know, did you ever work for his mentor, Bill Brown, at Sunshine Wrestling Federation and Florida Championship Federation?
No, I did not.
So,
If I did, it was so inspiring, I forgot. Oh, I said it. I'm just kidding. No, I don't remember.
yeah, everybody, I don't care who you are. I don't care, you know, who you are. We all have bad days. The difference with pro wrestlers, if you're having a bad day and you have to go into that ring, you are being watched by God knows who. You have to put on a good show. You have to put the person over, or you need to get yourself over. How did you handle those days going into the ring when you're just having a shitty
Jeez.
day mentally?
I honestly can't remember any days like that. Maybe there was a couple when my wife and I were going through a rough patch at a point, or one of the many rough patches. There are those iron-on patches, so they come off once in a while. You got to iron them back and hope for the best the next time. And before you know it, there's that patch coming off again. But I can't honestly remember it again. Maybe a couple of times when her and I was off, my mind was somewhere else. But
Right.
I don't remember. I always like to say I used wrestling, and this is the God's honest truth, and I don't want to offend any wrestlers, but I used the make-believe world of wrestling to escape the real-world drama. When I got in my car to go to a show, I no longer had a wife. I no longer had kids talking back to me. A kid, which he didn't anyways. I'm just using that as that. I no longer had bills to pay. I had it on my mind to hook up with my friends down the road where we meet, and we went to the shows, and all I did was have fun when I got there. I didn't cause drama. I didn't talk back. I didn't care if I won or lost. I did what was asked to the best of my ability, and I had fun. I couldn't wait to get on down the road to do it again.
Yeah.
That's how I like to remember it. I'm sure there was some times where I wasn't having the fun I thought I should, but that was because she wouldn't take her clothes off. Oh, I did it again. I went there.
Some say the golden era was the last pure era of wrestling. Do you agree with that sentiment?
The golden era? What is the golden era? Everybody considers the golden era whatever their era they liked best, right? Like you always say, oh, the best times of my life were whenever the best times in your life were. I mean,
Yeah. For me, I consider what a question like this the golden era. I think that you're kind of on the cusp at towards the end of the golden era, but you're still involved. Back during the days of Georgia Championship Wrestling, of Mid South, of Hulk Hogan, early Hulk Hogan years, Paul Orndorff, and Bob Armstrong, and all those other guys.
yeah, again, all that kind of stuff's like matter of an opinion. It's like who's the greatest. There's no real such thing as the greatest. You can argue it all day long. Like I know a friend of mine. He thinks the Beatles are overrated, and I say, well, they sold more records than anybody else. So if they're overrated, they did a pretty damn good job of it. But
Yeah,
it's all matter of an opinion, anyways, for the most part.
right,
But I think
right,
when it comes to something as statistic as that, though, the Beatles sold like 300 million worldwide albums, more than anybody in history. How can you not say they weren't the greatest? Because
right,
money talks.
right.
And
Yeah.
I'll prove to you money talks. Send it to me and I'll tell you with my mouth
You
talking.
know, 2025 has been brutal, in my opinion,
Ugh.
on the professional wrestling community. We've lost a lot of guys. Um, the biggest death I think that has had the most impact. No offense to all the other people who's passed away towards their families, because obviously their death had an impact as well. But when we talk about Hulk Hogan, this is a guy who didn't change professional wrestling once; he did it twice. Um,
Yep.
you and I being friends, I know that you took this hard. Talk to me about what Hogan meant to you, because I'm pretty sure that through our conversations, you said you actually never stepped foot in the ring with Hogan,
Never
but
met him.
right, never met him. So, what did Hogan mean to you, and the grief that you had when he passed away? Talk to me about that as well.
I don't know. It's just, I've been a fan of Hulk Hogan ever since he first popped on the scene in the late 90s or late 70s, 90s, late 70s. I just like the look. I like the gimmick. I like the suave. What do you call that? I liked his aura. What do you his presence? I don't know. I just thought it was cool
Right,
in every incarnation, from the heel with Freddie Blassie to the AWA where he started turning babyface to the breakout superstar. I just liked it. I thought it was cool. I thought it was awesome, and he was great in the role. And anybody who says that they could have done that with Gary Von Erich or Dusty Rose, no, they couldn't have. Nobody in that era, or nobody in that era could have been put in that same spot and been as successful, because it's more than just being a vision, being the person that people are looking at. You also have to be the person able to handle it. You have to be able to handle it. And how he handled it in private is his own business. I don't know, but he obviously handled it. He had to do all the interviews with the TV stations and the radio shows and the appearances with the Make-A-Wish. He had to do all that. You think Kerry Von Erich would have been able to do that? No, he would not have. He could barely show up for shows. When he came to Tampa to defend the NWA title, he demanded a certain substance before he would defend it. That's
right,
not the kind of guy you want as your leader of the pack, so to speak. And Hulk just fit the bill in a time when he needed. There was 5 years of Bob Backlund, who was a fantastic champion, but times changed and Hulk changed him for good, for the
right.
better. I don't care what anybody says. People made more money in the history of the business than ever when Hulk really took off. And I don't believe he held anybody down either. Anybody that was held down is simply someone who didn't take advantage of what opportunities they were given, didn't save the money that he made them. Could you imagine making a $15,000 payoff to wrestle Hulk Hogan in Madison Square Garden like Kamala and then complain you were underpaid? Come on.
Right.
Before that, you were making a lot less. Shut up
Yeah.
and enjoy the money.
Right. Now, this next question would be answered differently by every single person that I ask. So I want to know Bob's answer on this. What do you think modern wrestlers today could learn from someone like Hulk Hogan?
I don't really know. Honestly, I don't know. I think a lot of how you feel about the business, how you were taught. I mean, Hulk was taught by one of the most respected badass guys in the business, right? Hiro Matsuda.
Right.
And all the people who like to think of the Hulk Hogan, oh, this guy could have beat his ass. He wasn't a tough guy. He was trained by Hiro Matsuda, for God's sakes. You think Hiro Matsuda is going to train pussies? Hiro Matsuda trained Ron Simmons. You're going to tell Ron Simmons he's not a tough guy? Come on.
Yeah.
And Hulk Hogan, I think, was a lot tougher than people give him credit for, and a hell of a lot better wrestler than people give him credit for, and one of the all-time greatest workers because he could control a crowd as better, better than anybody. Ever see the match with him against The Rock at WrestleMania 18 or whatever it was?
Amazing.
Holy
Amazing.
mackerel! And that was all. A lot of times, the crowd reaction was more for them just staring at each other
Yeah.
and looking at the crowd than any match in history.
Right.
That's control. That's psychology. That's working.
Absolutely. Now, unfortunately, throughout the years, we've lost Macho Man Randy Savage, Rowdy Piper, the Ultimate Warrior, Paul Orndorff. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
Terry Funk, who I got
Terry
the
Funk.
Terry Funk shirt on.
Yep,
Brand new,
Terry Funk,
brand new, right there.
absolutely. If you could go back to say one last thing to any one of these legends who are no longer with us, who would it be, and what would you say to them?
Well, obviously it would be Terry.
Right.
I said everything to him. I said everything to him while he was alive. Yeah. Everything I said to him, I told him when he was here.
Now, there was someone else who was very, very important to you in your life, someone who wasn't even part of professional wrestling, um, someone that I was a huge fan as a child, but you became personal friends with him. So obviously, he meant more to you than a lot of fans who are never got the opportunity to get to know him the way you did. That was Evel Knievel. Talk to me about Evel Knievel. Talk to me about when did you first become a fan of his, and tell me the story. I know you've told to me already, but I want the rest of the world to know of how you guys met and became friends.
I first became aware of him in 1968 after he had his famous crash at Caesar's Palace. I was only like 5 years old, but that's, and I was just hooked. And my grandmother at the time, who lived in Williamston, Michigan, if you know wrestling history, you know what that means. The Sheik
Yep.
was from his mansion was there. But she used to send me newspaper clips. She knew how much I'd fallen in love with Evel Knievel and his legend, and she'd send me newspaper clippings. It almost seemed like almost every day. I like to say that, but it wasn't. But every week or whatever, because he was always doing something. And she would just send me newspaper clippings of what he's doing now, what he's doing. I still have all those clippings too, by the way. And I was just hooked. I think everybody has people in their life that come along that just click for whatever reason, whether it's Elvis or Charles Manson. Well, I like Charles Manson too, but you can't mark them all bad kids. But at least he was entertaining.
Yeah.
But I could get on the Charles Manson rabbit hole on YouTube for hours, trust me. But I've just loved Evel since I was a kid, man. It just clicked. I couldn't wait. It was like Muhammad Ali too. I've been a huge Muhammad Ali fan. When I was in my life, it was Muhammad Ali, Evel Knievel, Don Rickles, and Terry Funk in that order. Right? I loved Evel. Then Muhammad came along, and I put him in there. And then I was a huge Don Rickles fan. And then I got in wrestling. It was Terry Funk. And of all the people, like if Muhammad Ali, Evel Knievel, or Don Rickles were on the Tonight Show when I was a kid, that's the only people my parents would let me stay up late on a school night and watch because they knew they wouldn't hear the end of it if they didn't.
Right.
But this Evel, man, I just loved him, and I still love him as much as I ever did. If I see him as the same
Right.
as I did when I was a kid, just larger than life, take no prisoners, say what I'm going to do and do it no matter what the consequences person. And I know he wasn't perfect. There's a lot of people out there that will, I'll see a post about Evel and someone, well, he was this, he was that. Well, guess what? Nobody's who they seem to be anyways. But to me, he was just one of the, and he was always good to me. But as a kid, he was my hero. He told me not to do drugs when I was a kid. You know what I didn't do? Drugs. He told me not to smoke when I was a kid. You know what I didn't do? Smoke. And my dad smoked. A lot of kids use the excuse their parents smoke of, oh, they smoked, I smoke. Evel told me not to. I didn't do it. Doesn't matter how stupid or superficial it sounds. Superficial, we like that word. Doesn't matter how superficial that sounds. He told me not to do it as a kid, and I didn't do it. He told me to be good to my parents, listen to my parents, and I was, and I did. And he told us not to drink as kids, even though he liked to drink. But he was an adult. Guess what? I didn't drink when I was a kid. I didn't smoke pot. I had a circle of friends that were my best childhood friends, right? The friends that always supported me, Evel Knievel love and my wrestling love, people like Mark Starkey and Patricia Cirillo and Gina Shemami. I'm mentioning these names because they were so, Brian Reynolds and Richie Shemami, they're so instrumental in my childhood because they supported me, right? They wanted me to, when I was going to be the Evel Knievel, say, you can do it. When I wanted to be the wrestler, yeah, you can do it. And they were always there, and they would take me to the shows when I was a kid, whatever. But they like to, dabble in the stuff, but they would never ask me to do it. And peer pressure is just an excuse to do what you want. You can say what you want, but in reality, you're either very weak-minded or it's an excuse to do what you want. Here, smoke this. No, I can't smoke it. Okay, then you wanted to. Right. They wouldn't do that. If they did it maybe in the beginning, I said, no, man, I don't need that stuff. Don't worry, Bob. But I hung around them like, and they didn't look down on me or think less of me. But again, it was all evil. He told me not to do it. I didn't do it. I listened. But I did have my first drink at like 28 years old because of Axel Rotten at WCW. But and that was a good 3 years. A good 3 years. That was a good 3 years.
You tried alcohol at 28 years old. What a
yeah. Yeah, 28 years old. And I got drunk. Penelope Paradise was there. Thank you for babysitting me. And
yeah. JT said, I love you, Bob. But tell me, man, you were fortunate like I was. Again, you were one of the people that I looked up to as a kid. I explained why. Yours was Evel Knievel. And like me, you were able to meet and befriend your idol. How did this come about?
It was again, it was just kind of being at the right place at the right time and saying the right thing to the right people, because I never saw Evel in person when I was a kid. I always watched him on TV, obviously, and had all the toys. It was the best toy ever, best toy line ever. In 1990, Evel came to his son, Robbie Knievel, came to do a jump right down the road here in Bradenton, Florida, at the Tom Stuyvesant DeSoto Speedway. He's going to jump 30 cars. And the week before Robbie was going to jump, Evel came into the Speedway to do an appearance to draw interest in the jump, which, by the way, sold out. And Robbie did a spectacular job. I was there. It was awesome. In the rain, no less, but he made the jump. It's on YouTube. You can hear me screaming like a girl. No, I'm just kidding. That was a girl I was with screaming to get away. But, I let her go. I didn't have handcuffs. I just hold her on. But anyways, actually, it was my friend Wes, again, was with me for that one. But I met Evel at that track. I stood in line with the rest of the marks, as we call them. And I had a poster, which I still have. It's like in my room over there, that he signed. It was on my wall as a kid. Because Evel was everywhere when I was a kid. He didn't just have the toys, man. And when you went to the store in the 70s, they had Evel trading cards, puzzles, books, games. Mm-hmm. Any section of the store you went in, and on the way out, they had more. It was just crazy. But I brought that poster, and I'm standing there, and he goes, "What's your name?" And I said, "Bob, just like yours." Like a dummy, because his real name was Robert and Bob, whatever. Yeah. And he signed it to me. To Bob, Happy Landings, Evel Knievel. That was in 1990, and that was it, right? I got to shake his hand, and I was like, "Oh," the girly thing. I'll never wash my hand again. But that was a cool moment, but that was it, And so you didn't really get to meet him though, because it's just it's a right line of people in front of you, a line of people behind you, and then around 1997, late 96. 97, probably early 97. The internet was starting to pop up, started to become popular. And I didn't have a computer, and computers were really expensive back then. I remember going to the library with my son, and we're just flipping around. I just thought, hey, because what's this internet? Let's check it out. And I just typed in the name Evel Knievel, just like, like a normal fan would. Right. And he had his own website and his own fan club that I knew nothing about because I was unaware of the internet's inner workings or existence. Mm-hmm. And so I called the fan club number. And before that, I had always get my wife to try to, there was a show, Ginny Jones is the one I remember the most. Mm-hmm. At the end of the show, it would say, if you have show ideas, call this number. And I was like, hey, call that number and say, do a show about people that want to meet their childhood heroes, But I called that number, the fan club number, and it would happen to be a guy named Mike Gray, who was the guy who ran the website and ran Evel's fan club, where he sold T-shirts and posters and little things. And I just asked him, I said, and I knew that Evel had lived in Clearwater in the summertime. You know, he's from Butte, Montana, but in the summer he would come to Florida, or in the winter. The winter he'd come to Florida. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And Mike goes, and I said, does Evel ever meet his fans? And at that time I had this huge collection of stuff that I had collected, pinball machines and blah, blah, whatever. And I told Mike about this stuff. He goes, yeah, Evel loves to meet his fans and bring the pictures, and he'd love to see it and blah, blah. So he set up a meeting with him at a golf course in Clearwater called Feather Sound. And I met him there. I brought my friend with me, Wes, because we were still friends back then before religion got in the way. But, you know, okay, I'm rambling here, but we're at the golf course, you know, and he's coming back from playing because he was a golf hustler, right? He's always playing golf and hustling golf. And he was a big gambling guy. And he's over by his SUV. I remember it was a Chevy Tahoe. It's crazy what you remember, right?
Right. Yep.
He's over there. I'm like, oh, geez. I was like nervous as all hell, right? And I went up, Mr. Knievel, Mike Gray set up a meeting. Oh, hey, Bob. He's real nice. Shook my hand. He goes, go down to the road, the end of the road. There's a bar there. I'll be down in a few minutes. I got to go in here and collect my winnings from these guys because he'd won some money in the course. And like an hour goes by. My friend Wes and I are sitting in the bar, and an hour goes by, and I'm just sitting there like, oh, my God. The guy I put on a pedestal as high as you could ever put anybody just blew me off. That's what I was thinking, right?
Right.
And then he walked in. And I swear it was like a light, you know, behind him was like this. Oh, he walked in and just, you know, in my mind, right? Like Jesus Christ walked in. Okay, I don't want to get carried away and offend anybody, but in my mind, it was just like, oh, you know, it was just like a bright light. And he was there in a silhouette, you know? And he motioned for us to come over, and he sat there and he talked to us for over 3 hours, buying us drinks, signing business cards. And at that time, I'd started doing a job for an airport limo service. So I was coming up to Tampa and Clearwater all the time, taking people to the airport, picking them up, dropping them. Another great job, by the way. I had to stop an old woman for beating her husband once, but, you know, she was frail, so I was able to handle it. But as Evel's talking, he's just talking about the canyon jump. And somehow Vince or wrestling came up. I don't know if I just said, well, I used to be a wrestler. He goes, oh, you know, Vince McMahon helped promote the canyon jump. And he goes, oh, yeah, I know. And he talked about how he wasn't really a wrestling fan, but he respected Vince McMahon for his business sense. And I just, like any fan said to him, I said, this is how our friendship was able to grow, right. I guess you'd call it. I just said, where do you keep the rocket from the canyon jump? He goes, oh, I keep it in a storage unit, friend's storage unit right around here. He said, next time you're up this way, give me a call. And I'll take you by to show it to you. So, right, that's like you're in, right? You're like, whoa, this is going to be more than just meeting, hopefully, right? And so he signed his business cards. He's like, this is my home. This is my mobile, which is what he called a cell phone. Nobody had cell phones really back then, not many. I didn't have a personal cell phone. I had a giant cell phone about that big with a whipping tin on it for my airport limo job at that time. You could have literally killed somebody with it. Speaking of cell phones, I got one of the old Paulie Dangerously cell phones that he used to hit people with the head with.
Yeah.
I was in the dressing room at WCW one night. He was laying there and goes, Paul, what are you going to do? I go, oh, you can have it. So I still have that somewhere.
Nice.
But anyways, so I just mentioned, you know, that I was an airport limo. I come this way. Well, next time you're up this way, I'm trying not to mumble. Let me know and I'll take you by. So literally, I know it wasn't the next day, but I like to say, you know, the next day I called him. But it was very soon after. Trust me. I was like, I'm coming up that way. And he goes, well, bring your wife and kid and I'll meet you. He met us at the same golf course. And this is another thing that was always haunted me, right? He had this awesome car. It was an Austin Martin. And it had all this like gimmicky stuff and he pushed button like smoke screen, thumbtack, you know, like a James Bond car. And he goes, Bob, you ride with me and have your wife follow me to the warehouse. And I was like, oh shit, that sucks. I told him, I said, my wife's not, she don't know nothing about St. Pete. He goes, well, you follow me then. So, cause I was like, I was going to get to ride in the car with Evel Knievel, right? So I'm following him and he didn't just call himself Evel Knievel. He was Evel Knievel, right? So I'm following him in the streets of St. Pete, you know, trying to keep up with him as he's going to this warehouse. And he had his wife with him at the time, who was with him when he died too. It's not just saying like that, but so he took us and he showed us the rocket and the bike he used for the shark jump, and his life-size statue was there, and he let my kids sit in the rocket. And okay, it was just awesome day. And that's how it did. It just went from there, right? And we just, I could call him anytime I wanted. He would call. Sometimes he'd call me at 2 a.m. just because he knew I stayed up late. Bob, what are you doing? I go, I'm just watching this. And we just talk about stupid stuff like, yeah, well, I'm watching this and I'm done, whatever. It was amazing. There's a recording that he called me once. I had it for years. I saved it where he's just, hey, Bob. He'd always call, Bob, it's Evel. He goes, I'm back in town. Give me a call. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. Call me back. And I had that recording for years. I don't have it anymore. I wish I did. But that kind of stuff was just, it meant the world to me. And to be able to call him every year on his birthday, just to wish him a happy birthday. And it was just, to me, it was just the best. The people who say don't meet your heroes, I'd rather meet my heroes and be disappointed than miss the opportunity to meet them.
Absolutely.
And in Evil's case, they're all my heroes, actually. I got to meet, obviously Terry Funk and the other heroes, and they were all just gold to me, and especially Evil.
Yeah.
And I was able to call him a week before he passed away and tell him I loved him and thank him for everything he did for me. And his last words to me were the same words that Malenko said to me. And he says, I love you too, Bob. And those are the last words he said to me. And, I want to hear a funny story about Evil once.
Absolutely.
He called me out of the blue for one. In 1978, he got in trouble for beating a guy up with a baseball bat, which really caused him to lose everything because, people kind of frown on that. But as they get, a lot of people turned on him, right? They pulled his toys from the shelf. And when I was a kid, I just thought, oh, those son of a bitch, you shouldn't have pissed Evil off. They deserved it. I stuck up for him, right? And he called me out of the blue one time. And he goes, Bob, let me ask you something. And I said, yeah. He goes, would you ever consider hurting people for money? And I said, I never thought about it. He goes, well, think about it. Let me know. He never brought it up again, and I never he must have just been in one of his moods, because if you listen to an interview that he did with Tom Schneider, remember Tom Schneider?
Yeah, yep.
He did an interview with him, and Tom Schneider said, do you have any regrets? He goes, yeah, I regret. Next time I'll send somebody. That's what he said. So he called me out of the blue. He's like, would you ever hurt somebody for money? Well, I never thought about it.
Now, I know you have a lot of Evel Knievel memorabilia and stuff, but is there anything particular maybe that he gave to you that means more to you than anything else that you have?
No, because I don't have as much anymore. I don't have a lot of it's in the Evel Knievel Museum now. The only thing that Evel gave me that means the world to me is his friendship. Right. And no matter what he could have gave me physically, it didn't mean nothing as much as that friendship. And, just the little things he did for me. God, he had A&E come to my house when he did the biography on A&E, and they shot it at my house. They put my name in the credits. All the pictures and the pinball machine, the toys that are in that interview or in that biography on A&E were shot at my house. He had a book in he used to keep all his stuff in a big tour truck that he used to tour around the country in Clearwater at a friend's storage, or a friend's it was a car dealer, not car dealer, but anyways, a car place. Okay. And he kept it in the back, stored this, it was all rusted and faded. It's in the museum now. It's all been restored. It's beautiful. But he kept all his stuff in there, and he goes, Bob, could you do inventory for me? Because I want to sell all this stuff he was going to sell it to a Japanese company at that time, I think. And at the time, again, I was still doing the airport limo service. And so I would come up there once in a while. My wife and I would go through stuff. We'd write down what he had. And then I asked him, I said, do you care if I just take all the stuff home in one of the vans sometime? Because I could get it done quicker. And he was like, I don't care. Do it. So I took all the stuff home. That's why the A&E, right? I had it all at my house. And so the A&E came, and they knew I had the ski jump trophy he won in 59 or whatever. It was at my house. So they used it in the show. But, God, I can't think where I'm going with the story. There's a reason for it.
Yeah. Well, I asked you about something that you have that means.
Oh, I know what it was. I know. Let me tell you real quick. I know what it was, but in '99 he came out with a book called Evil Ways, and he called me and he said, Bob, I want you to pick out the best pictures you have, at your house, and send them to the publisher, and I want you to include one with you and your son for the book. And I was like, you serious? He goes, of course. So he put a picture of me and my son in the book, and he'd also come out with Matt Hoffman was a famous BMX racer, and he came out with an Evel Knievel limited edition BMX bike, and he gave my son one for Christmas one year, and I took a picture of that, and that's in the book. Right. But another cool thing was that when I would go through his stuff, I would call him and go, hey, Evel, how much would you sell this for me? You got 3 of them. He goes, and he said, Bob, if I have more than one of anything, just take it. You don't have to ask. Right. So I never did, but I would always call him. You got this picture? You got 4 of them. How much? You go, I just take one. That's how cool he was.
Now, going back to Terry Funk,
Oh,
I know that you have a pair of his boots. I know there's a story behind it. You've told me the story, but I want you to share the story to everyone about that.
well, it's a simple story. It was at the sporting tournament in Tampa. You know, when I first met Terry, it was in Championship Wrestling from Florida, which was not too many months after I first started working there. Thanks to Lewis, like I had said, I had drove home that Sunday morning, drove all the way back to Orlando, 3.5 hours to be on that show where I wrestled Jerry Grave and met him for the first time. We've been friends ever since. We were the Mighty Yankee Tag Team Champions, NWA Tag Team Champions in Florida. So I wasn't a complete loser, but Uh, so I was wrestling for Championship Wrestling from Florida because after I did good with the match with Jerry, they asked me to do TV, and that kind of just domino effects into more work. And Terry walked in the dressing room, and again, it was like that evil thing. I was like, oh, he came in and he was wearing those boots, and I wear an earring in my ear today because of that day and because of Terry.
Right.
He walked in the dressing room and had a dangly earring, and I went, that's the coolest thing I ever saw in my life. So, like, if he was wearing like those Uggs or something, I probably would have thought they were the coolest things, right? Because it was Terry Funk, but he's just wearing those boots. And I started, talking to him and I asked him, where you get them. And he goes, well, and they end up giving me a pair. He goes, I want you to have these. And then he told me where to get them. He said, but do me a favor, don't tell anybody where you got them because everybody will be wearing them. That's what he told me. So he gave me my first pair, and I've had like 30 or 40 pair since. I don't have them anymore, but again, I don't have the evil stuff anymore. It's all in the evil museum. But yeah, that's what, and I've wore those boots all over the world, not world, all over the country with Flair, the Malenkos,
Yep.
you know.
Yep. Now, explain. There's been the psychology of wrestling seem to have changed. So it's storylines and how they do the storylines. Can you tell me how in-ring storyline has changed since the days of you wrestling, in your opinion?
I don't know if there's more thought put into it. I think it's more choreographed thought put into it, I know that I think Dusty and Kevin and all, they used to keep little notebooks with their stories that were more advanced in their minds than what they would translate to you as they're telling you. Like when Jerry Gray and I became the Mighty Yankees, Mike Graham and Kevin just called us in the dressing room in Sarasota one night and goes, hey, you guys want to be the Mighty Yankees? Here's some masks. We're going to make you the champions. So it's like, okay, that was the extent of the storyline. You're wrestling Mike Graham and Steve Kern and you're winning. Oh, okay. That's how
Right.
much thought went into it. But, I can't speak for what's going on nowadays because I'm not there, but I like some of it and I don't like all of it. And it's the same. It's always been, right? I watched ever since I've watched wrestling, never like everything or always liked everything. When you go back and I always bring this up, but you go back and watch Championship Wrestling from Florida in 1976. The opening match is the Great Mephisto against two idiots that don't know how to lace their boots. The other match is Haystacks Calhoun, who can barely get in a ring and shouldn't have been in to begin with. You got someone else who's someone else, but the main event is Bob Orton Jr. and Steve Kerr, and you thought you saw the greatest thing in the history of the world because at that time it was. But
Right.
so it's like not all going to be good,
Right. Right. Now that's true. You mentioned about wrestling with a mask, and this is something that I've always wondered. When you have a mask on in the ring, how does it affect your wrestling style as far as do you get winded quicker because of that mask and it feels like your oxygen is restricted, your eyesight even? How was it with wrestling with a mask, and did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you whatever about it?
Yeah, at first, I didn't care for, like when we were the Mighty Yankees, we wore the masks like Mr. Wrestling too. They just kind of go over your head and they tied in the front I don't know, but they
Mhm.
tied under here. They didn't have the laces down the back like a Mil Mascaris or whatever, where they're more secure. They were just to slip over there. I hated those because when we'd wrestle Mike Graham and Steve Kern, they used to or Kevin, or they'd turn them sideways so you couldn't see. Or I remember one night in Miami, it was me and Jerry wrestling Kevin Sullivan, Bugsy McGraw, and Kevin threw me outside the ring. There was a guy who had an ice cream cone and ringside, and Kevin grabbed it and stuck it in the eye hole of my mask. Uh, so those masks weren't when I was a mask superstar, though, where I got my mask from Louis Estea, who was a mask master of making masks. That mask was good because it fit secure. But it was just like anything else, getting used to it. I mean, there's a lot of guys that, hey, I like to wear tennis shoes when I wrestle. Well, try wrestling boots. No, but then they try them and they go, hey, these are pretty good once you get used to it. So it's the same with the wrestling mask, and I was in decent shape. I was never, the bodybuilder, but I had pretty good cardio when I was younger.
Yeah.
I can't even walk up steps now without breathing hard. But that's morbid
Now,
obesity and old age for you.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, but don't walk off. Um, who did you prefer wrestling in the ring, Joe Malenko or Dean Malenko? I have to ask
Oh
you.
man, that's not it. Jeez. I'll be honest with you, and I'm going to say Dean for this reason, because I worked with Dean more than Joe. I didn't work with Joe a whole lot. When I did, it was always awesome. I had singles, tag teams. It was a little different style, and I had no problem with it. It was always an honor, a privilege, a learning experience. Again, I'm not just saying that because you might hear it. It's because I love them, all the Malenkos. But I had more matches with Dean because we were involved in that Suncoast Pro Wrestling where we do the TV matches, and then we did little house shows, and we'd have, 20, 30, 35-minute matches. So it's a different type of situation, I guess you'd say,
Right.
So I can't say I liked either one more than the other, but I wrestled Dean more. So I don't know.
Right.
No disrespect to either. They're two of the best to ever lace professional wrestling boots, you tennis shoe wearing idiots out there.
Absolutely. And as I said at the beginning of the podcast, you have been in the ring amongst the who's, your Ric Flairs, your Stings, so many professional wrestlers that are considered, again, the greats, the legends. Did you feel different amount of pressure on you when you were entering the ring, or, wrestling these different guys like your Flairs or your Stings?
I don't know. I always got nervous.
Right.
And the funny story about Flair is, I know it was in Orlando, and Dave Penzer was one of Jody Hamilton's right hand man. He would do things for Jody, whatever, get the guys to sign the releases and just do what Jody needed. But I remember in Orlando, Dave came up to me and he said, "Guess who you're working?" I said, "Who?" And he said, "Flair." I said, "Flair? I don't want to work with Flair." And he said, "What do you mean you don't want to work with Flair?" I said, he goes, "Jody was trying to figure out who could be good with Flair." And Dave said, "I said you." And Jody liked it. And I said, "Well, I don't want to work with Flair. What if I hurt him? I'll be the most hated guy in the business." No, I don't want to do that. So I wasn't afraid of getting hurt by Flair. I was afraid of making a mistake and hurting him in my mind. But then I went out there and it was just so easy. I was standing by the curtain with him. We don't like to expose things, but I was standing there just waiting to go out. And literally before we go out, just, "What are we going to do, Rick?" And he goes, "Just listen to me, Bob, and remember the figure 4. And I just went out there, and everything you see me do was from poking his eye to everything. He told me to do it. Poke the eyes. It was awesome.
Right. I want to go back to your father for a moment. I know he was sick when you were younger. How old were you when he passed away?
He died in 1990, and at the time I was on the road a lot. And at that time I happened to be home visiting because I'd hurt my back. So I was out for a few weeks, and that's the day he died. And I remember whatever 1990 is, for born in 1963, what is that, like 20 something? 20, I can't figure it out. So 73, 83, like 27, I guess, 28. And he had the lung cancer, and it was so bad there was a point where the doctors told him, you might as well not quit smoking now. It's one thing he enjoyed, right?
Right.
And to this day I can remember him. My mom went to the store and she brought him a carton of cigarettes, and she gave it to my son, who was like 3 or 4 years old, to give to him. And I went in and he's laying in his chair looking weird, like in a strange position. And I thought, oh, geez, I hope Dad's not dead. I thought that to myself, right? And my kid woke him up, and okay, he gave him the cigarettes. And my dad did whatever he always did with my grandkid, with my son, goofing around. And then a few minutes, I know we're going off the rails because you just said to ask about my dad, but
that was good. Yeah.
We were, I heard a banging on the back door, and I go out there, and he's standing over a garbage can, and blood was shooting out of his mouth like someone opened a faucet. And I'm like, Mom, Dad, yeah. And she's calling you know how you do, calling the ambulance. And I held him in my arms until he died because what he hit is like his lungs cancer just hemorrhaged and
Right.
blood shooting out of his mouth. And I'm sitting there crying like a big sissy, like you do, and telling him I love him. And I was telling my dad, I said, we're calling the ambulance. And he's like, no, no. He knew it was over, right? So he said, no, no. And I remember sitting in my room after that and I was crying and the cops came. And my dad would go down to the local donut shop. And I don't want to be cliche, but he'd go down to the local donut shop every morning and have coffee and donuts with all the cops. So he was friends with all the cops in town. And the cops were there and several of them showed up and they're all tears in their eyes, you know. And my wife came in and she said, the cops want to talk to you. And I said, what the fuck do they want to talk about? He's dead. What are they going to ask me? What are they going to? Yeah, I was really pissed. I was like throwing, you know, being an asshole. But that's what I remember about that day. Thanks for bringing it up. What are you going to do? Mention the day Evel died? Are you going to mention the day I cried when I was in the hospital with him? What are you going to do? You try to get ratings out of tears? Is that what you're
But
trying
yeah,
to
well, the reason why I asked is I was wondering if he ever had the opportunity to see you wrestle.
Oh, you know, he never liked wrestling and he never saw me wrestle in person, but he did see me, you know, obviously on TV. But
Right.
I remember he never liked wrestling. It wasn't that he thought it was a joke. He could never understand why a person would do what they to their body, what wrestling did to their body, because he would be there when I'd come home from training, you know, and be all beat up and sore and bruised. And he just couldn't understand it for the life of him. But I remember two things that I remember most about him. I very rarely talked to him about wrestling. I just did my thing, went to the school, went to the shows. And I remember when Dr. D. David Schultz slapped John Stossel on
Mhm.
2020. And I was like, Dad, you got to see this. He looked at it and he went, and he just laughed because I thought he would be, oh, that guy shouldn't have done it. He just laughed and said, well, that guy deserved it. And I was like, oh, gee, that. And then when I got my first match on Championship Wrestling from Florida, I wrestled a guy named Sean Royal, who was an up and comer at the time, who was a very good wrestler. And one of the biggest thrills of my life, right, was that Saturday after doing the TV on the Wednesday for Championship Wrestling from Florida that I grew up watching. You go home that Saturday night and watch that first show that I'm on, and Gordon Sully's calling the action. That was like, you thought you made it, right? And I showed my dad that, and he goes, you know, I never agreed with you about this wrestling, but I'm proud of you because you're doing what you wanted to do, and you chased your dream. And but he was never again. He wasn't a wrestling fan. Never went to a live show, but he took me to my first live show. You know, Venice High School, 1977, the Missouri Mauler, Dusty Rhodes in the main event, sold out to the rafters. I still got the crappy Polaroid pictures. But my dad took me to the first show
Awesome.
and a few others.
Well, another reason why I asked you that question is I also watched my father take his last breath, and my dad's death. We were close. It messed me up to the point that I became homeless because I didn't want to admit I was depressed. Didn't handle it well. When your father passed away, again, you're a professional wrestler. You're traveling a lot. You said earlier that wrestling kind of took you away from all of your worries and stuff like that. Was it one of those situations that after he passed, you couldn't wait to get back on the road to wrestle again? Or is it something that, because how devastating it was, you just were dreading to get back on the road to go wrestle?
You know, I can't say I was dreading to get back on the road, but I do know that there was a period of time where I was not a nice guy to people around me when I should have been. I took what happened to me, what happened to my dad, and how it affected me out on the people around me. And one night, and, you know, I was just mean and belligerent. Just I was like you.
Right.
I guess you'd call it depressed, but just angry and not at him or anything, but just the situation. And I had a dream one night. My dad, he came to me in a dream. I was being mean to my wife and, you know, yelling at her or something. And like in the hallway of the house, in the bedroom where my dad would spend most of his time, uh, the door opened. My dad was there, and he didn't say a word to me. He gave me the dirtiest look. Like it's giving me chills even thinking about it. He gave me the dirtiest look that made me feel like he's telling me to stop this shit. Enough is enough. And then he like a second later, he's like laying in the bed like he always was when he was sick, and he's laughing. And then the last thing he said was, I love you. And I woke up. Whew. But then I quit being that way. I don't know if it was him or just, your mind works screwy.
Yeah.
But I've had lots of dreams over the years, like with Evel and Malenko, that are so real that you just, even my dog, one of the most vivid dreams I ever had was when my dog passed away. Where you just swear that they're there. And I'm not a religious guy either, so, I don't know, just screwed up in the head, I guess.
We're all screwed up in the head.
Though I do believe, I know this is going to offend a lot of people. I do believe that there's something after you die. I just don't believe that whatever it is cares about you while you're here. And I don't care what anybody says. It's proven every single day that what I'm saying is true. There may be a God, but he does not care about you while you're here, or you would not be going through some of the stuff you go through. I don't care. I know I'll offend some people for saying that. And everybody has their own beliefs. My mom and dad were both God-fearing people. They went to church. They were good people. They'd give you the shirt off their back, but they both died horrible, miserable deaths. And I realize it's the, choices in life that put you in those situations. And it's that. What's that? What do they say about what's that saying when it comes to free will? Right?
Yeah, free will.
They always say God will be there for you. God will be there for you. And I prayed my dad would get better. I prayed my mom would get better. And guess what? They didn't. But they believed, and I'm sure they're in a better place, and I hope they are. But I can't sit here and say that whatever the entity is that rules the world beyond us cares about us while we're here. He lets us live our lives, and that's fine. But to sit here and think that, like people who, like, let's say, for instance, like you're going through a tough time, your friend's going through a tough time, and you pray they're going to get through the surgery, and they get through the surgery, and you give all the glory to God. But then if they die, you don't say, well, God, why didn't you listen? You go, well, it was his time. God can't do wrong in some people's eyes. But to me, if I'm sitting here saying, help me, and you don't help me, well, then I'm going to think you don't care. That's the way I look at it. Right. It may not be the right way to look at it. But I think that there's people that you give too much credit to God, right? Think the surgeons, think the technology, and they can say that God gave them the knowledge, but that's not even the case. People, become doctors because they want to be doctors. And again, I believe there's something out there. I just don't believe it. And who cares about you? It's proven every day. It's like the mentality of an entire town could be wiped out from a hurricane. And at the end of the road, there's an old lady who digs her dog out from under the shed, and it's alive. And she goes, oh, God was looking out after little Billy. Well, what about the rest of the freaking town? There's people who are giving God credit for hurricanes not hitting Florida yet this year. Well, why didn't he not have them hit Florida in the last 25 years? It's just the luck of the draw. I'm sorry I offended people on that one, but
hey man, look, your truth is your truth, and
it's not a good truth. Trust me.
Well, it doesn't matter. My podcast. I do not try to take away what people believe in. That's you wake up with your skin every morning.
That's not a good thing.
But one thing I've definitely got to know about you is I don't think there's any more of a harder critic about you than yourself. Is this something that you've been like this your entire life? Because look, you are a great professional wrestler. You are a trailblazer. You are responsible for so many of these guys who have these legendary careers. You had a hand in that, but you never give yourself credit for that. Why is that?
Well, I've always had a self-confidence issue, what do you call low self-esteem, horrible willpower, obviously by the fact that I got another Mountain Dew right here that hasn't been opened yet. I have, what is it? Low self-esteem, no willpower, all that stuff. Self-confidence, very, very no self-confidence. I've always had that problem. Hell, when I was back in the late 80s, the Funks, who again, I love Dory Funk too, by the way. I always praise Terry Funk just because, I'm wearing his shirt right now, but I love Dory Funk. One of the best matches and funnest matches I ever had was me and Dory against Bugsy McGraw and Jerry Gray at a sold out fair somewhere, but the crowd was crazy and I love the Funks, but they said they could get me in Japan. We want to go to Japan. No, I don't want to. Because I lacked confidence. I didn't want to go to Japan and get humiliated. I didn't have enough confidence in myself. Plus, I hated to fly, but
yeah. Now
you need to edit out that religious talk because I don't get.
I don't want it. You'll be fine. Talk to me about WCW. I want to move on to WCW. Tell me about the day. How did you get contacted that WCW was interested in bringing you to them?
Well, that's a fun little story. You know, in 1987, Jim Crockett, the bug-eyed mongoloid-looking freak that I like to call him, although his checks never bounced, he was an asshole. He bought out Florida wrestling, you know, and when he bought it out, he was going to do all these great things for Florida, but he really bought it out just to take over their syndicated TV shows, you know. So he eventually closed down Florida and put his, you know, his Crockett wrestling on all the channels. But so in '88, Mike Graham and Steve Kern and Gordon Solie restarted Florida Championship Wrestling or Championship Wrestling in Florida and called it Florida Championship Wrestling. And obviously, because I worked for Mike and them for the other one, they asked me to work for them, which we did. Me and Jerry, tag team champions again, blah blah, whatever. But so Sir Oliver Humperdinck, who I'd known for years prior to that, worked for Mike and Steve too. And one day when Ted Turner bought Crockett, the pay for TV went up to do TV, and they started paying for your hotel rooms and your rent cars and your gas. And Hump just asked me one day, "Hey Bob, you want to work for? You want to do TV and WCW?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." That's how it happened. It was all Hump. He just said, "You want to do it?" Sure.
Now, during this time in WCW, what was it like behind the curtain as far as you know your locker room leaders? Were there locker room leaders back then? What was just the vibe of WCW back then?
To me, everybody was just cool. I don't remember any locker room leaders. I respected everybody as long as they respected me, except for a few like Vader. He was an asshole. I've mentioned that all the time, and Buzz Sawyer. But most of the guys are really cool, very respectful. And I know Mark Merrill likes to tell, and maybe in his case it was. I can't speak for Mark. I helped Mark get in the business a little bit, and I got him in WCW. I'm not bragging about that; it's just a fact. But he likes to tell the story that when he got to WCW, there was a pecking order. There was a dressing room for the jobbers and the dressing room for the stars. And I can say, if there was, no one ever told me because I dressed in any dressing room I wanted at any show I ever went to. Like you go to center stage in Atlanta, there was 3 dressing rooms on the left, and you walked in left, in the middle, then I always dressed in the middle dressing room. And a lot of times you dressed with the people you traveled with. I traveled with other TV guys, like Mike Thor, who I just got in contact with after 15 years, one of my favorite traveling buddies. And all those, we traveled together. So we all dressed together. But I dressed with whoever I wanted. There was never a pecking order. When Terry Funk was in WCW in 89, 90, guess where I sat in every single dressing room show I was on with Terry Funk? I sat next to Terry Funk. That's what I said, you know? So WCW, everybody was just cool, laid back, I don't know. But again, Mark Merrill could have had a different. Maybe someone was ribbing him when he got there. Hey, you got to dress there. I don't know. I'm just saying. When I was there, even with WWE, when I worked for WWF in '95, I dressed with Jerry Lawler and Paul Bearer because they entertained me. The banter between those two was like comedy gold. So anytime, no matter where, it was never like a jobbers dress. It wasn't like a signed jobbers.
Right.
I dressed with them because they entertained me.
Yep. Now, in WCW, did you have someone that you just absolutely loved being in the ring with? You look forward to working with this person?
Oh, there was a lot of guys: Steamboat, Bobby Eaton, Cactus Jack. Although I only worked with Arn Anderson once, it was awesome. Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express. I mean, those guys were just so easy. You knew you weren't going to get hurt. They let you get your punch in. And a lot of people they complain about like TV guys or even fans saying, "Oh, the Steiner brothers beat guys up," and maybe they did, but they never beat me up. I worked with the Steiners a bunch of times, and they were fun. They always got my punch in, or they always let me get my punch in.
Right.
I mean, I think I'm even one of the only TV guys to knock Scott Steiner down with my punch.
Wow.
I don't know, but twice.
Um, Before we move on to WWF, I want you to tell me a funny story behind the curtains WCW, and as well as a good story of a road trip to your next
Oh,
show with WCW.
ugh. I don't really know. Like fun. I don't know if it's funny, but fun. I mean, there was this guy named
Yeah.
Mark Madden who worked for WCW. We got in egg fights along the road. Like they egged our. We're all of us guys are in our car, And all of a sudden we start getting egged on us. And it was Mark Madden and his group. So we like stop and get eggs. And we, it was like an egg fight along the highway. But I don't know. WCW, I was never a ribber.
Mhm.
And even though Chuck Coates says I was. No, I'm just kidding. Rest in peace, Chuck. But I only got ribbed one time, and I never got ribbed either. I was kind of late. I lay like under the radar, I
Mhm.
again show up on time, do what I was told. Didn't call drama. I'd find a corner of the dressing room I liked to, off in this. But Terry, did I tell you that? I don't know. Maybe.
Go ahead, Terry Taylor.
Chris Sullivan and I, like one time I was in the dressing room in Center Stage, and Terry Taylor walked in the dressing room. I just jokingly said, "Hey, this is a jobber's dressing room." And Terry said, "Well, I'm in the right place." He just walked in. I was just joking because,
Right.
And Terry was cool. And later that next day, Chris Sullivan and I were walking in the mall, just goofing around, passing the time. And we came across this trophy shop, and we thought, hey, let's get Terry an honorary jobber trophy just for the fun of it, right? So we got this little wrestler on top of a little trophy with engraved right. Terry Taylor honorary jobber. And we thought it'd just be funny. It sounds, even now it's like, that sounds stupid, but when you just pass the time, I don't know how much it was, $20 or so, $10 each. And we were in like Gainesville, Georgia, and we call Terry behind the dress or the arena. And we say, "Hey, Terry, we got something for you." And we give him the trophy, and he looks at it and he goes, "You guys think this is funny? You fucking think this is funny? My goddamn career's in the toilet. My dad's in a hospital dying, and you think this is funny? Fuck you guys." And he walked off.
Wow.
And I was almost in tears because I was like, holy shit, I thought Terry would just think it was funny, And Chris is like, "Oh man, we're. And I felt horrible. I mean, how your stomach just sinks. You was like, because we thought Terry was just, And I just felt horrible. And I went inside and I called a lady friend of mine because I was like, I went like in the lobby. I was like, "You won't believe what happened. We just goofing around with Terry, and he got all pissed off." And she's like adding fuel to it, like, "Oh, I hope you don't tell Jody, Jody Hamilton." And I was thinking that made me feel even worse. Like, oh shit, And again, it sounds stupid even telling the story, but in the moment, it was just like, oh shit. And then someone called me, "Cook, Jody wants to see you." I was like, oh, who that was, right? Jody, the assassin. Awesome guy, by the way. And because of him, I never got to work with Big Fat Vader. Exact words from Jody. I said, "Jody, I want to thank you for not making me work with Vader." And he goes, "I wasn't going to make you work with that fat bastard, Bob. Don't worry about it." But anyways, I come behind the curtain and Terry's standing there with Chris. And they're both laughing. They're like, we got you, we got you. So it was all a reverse rib on me.
On you.
So Chris had gotten in Terry's ears, like, "Hey, we got this trophy. Let's rib Bob and get all pissed off and make him think you're pissed." Again, it sounds stupid, but at the time it was just very funny. Like, oh shit.
Right.
So it's funny now.
Now, I said let's move on to WWF, but I actually have one more question about WCW. In your opinion, who was someone who you think was underutilized, who was underrated, that you think should have been able to be at the next level that wasn't at the time?
Terry Taylor, definitely one of them. I think Terry Taylor was one of the best. And of all the guys, there's like 3 people I would have loved to work with that I never got the opportunity. It was Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart. Yes, Bret Hart. I would have loved to work with Bret Hart. And Terry Taylor. I never got to work. And Ted DiBiase too, but never got to work with them. They're 4 of the best to ever lace up the boots again, kiddies. When I was a wrestler, the first thing my uncle told me was get some wrestling boots. You know what I did? I got them. And you know what? I couldn't wait to get them on my feet. I used to wear them all over the place to break them in. I wear them to the supermarket because I was training to be a pro wrestler. And when you're training, it's like you're going to be Evel Knievel, jump motorcycles and not without a helmet. Guess what? You're an idiot. Right. You got to train for the part. But yeah, those 3. But Terry Taylor, for your question, Terry Taylor, Brad Armstrong. Oh my God, Brad Armstrong.
Brad was amazing.
One of the nicest, funniest guys you'd ever want to be. Brad never walked in a room I was in and didn't make me laugh. Just walking in, he'd make you laugh. And it's one of those guys, it's like his brother, Brian Armstrong or Road Dogg. He's another guy, awesome guy. But yeah, Brad, man, I loved working with Brad. He was so smooth. And, it was like Dean Malenko, smooth as silk, light as a feather, perfect timing. Fantastic. Pro wrestling, what pro wrestling should be. Pro wrestling, for you wrestling fans out there, shouldn't be beating the hell out of each other. Should make it look like you're beating the hell out of each other. And those guys did it better than anybody. But yeah,
Yeah.
those two for sure.
Yeah. Now, move to WWF or WWE now. Kind of the same question with WCW. What do you remember about them asking you to come to WWF?
Again, it was the same thing. It wasn't Hump, but it was a guy named Jimmy Backlund, who I'd known for 15 years before that, who wrestled who was in WWF at the time as Jimmy Del Rey, with Tom Pritchard as the new Heavenly Bodies. I think they were managed by Jim Cornette. They came from Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And Jimmy just called me out of the blue in 95. Hey, Bobby, you want to work for WWF TV? I was like, hell yeah. That's how it happened. And they paid more than WCW. They flew you everywhere. They rented your car. WCW didn't fly you, and I'm not complaining about WCW. Again, right. I was treated awesome by them. No one disrespected me. But yeah, that's how I got in. Jimmy Backlund, a phone call.
Now, compared to WCW, what was the atmosphere like in WWF behind the curtains back then?
Well, I knew a lot of the guys when I got there. Like, I'd known Lex for years since he was in Florida. He was there, so he was cool as heck to me. The Razor Ramon, I knew Scott in Florida. Most money I ever made for one match was the Orange Bowl in Miami in '87, the Great American Bash against Scott Hall. Match lasted like less than 2 minutes. It was awesome. I wasn't even supposed to be on the show, but I got there. But and Kevin Nash, I knew him from this. So they were all people you already knew. So they were all just cool. And Kevin Nash, it was either Kevin Nash or Scott. I think it was Kevin Nash. Like the first day I was there, he called me into the hallway and he's there with like Pat Patterson and Tony Gurria or whatever. And then he goes, hey, this is Bob Cook. I was with him in WCW. He's a hell of a hand. He can work with whoever you want. I just want you to know that. And he didn't have to do that. And he wouldn't remember that he did. It may have been Scott, but I'm thinking it was Kevin. I don't know. But they were both always super cool to me. And, Scott Hall in '89, Scott Hall was sitting in the dressing room in WCW with Scott. And he was down in the dumps. He's like, oh, Bob, my career's going nowhere, blah, blah. And I told him, I said, Scott, man, if you ever get a chance to let Vince McMahon get his hands on your career, you're going to be a star someday. And he's like, oh, Bob, I really needed to hear that right now. And obviously, nothing to do with me. I'm just saying that I told him that. And look what happened. He went on to become a legend. And he was just a cool guy, too, by the way.
Yeah. And speaking of Vince McMahon, did you have any interactions with Vince while you were with WWF?
Nothing real other than the hello. And he thanked me a couple times for being there. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Good job. I remember talk about intimidation, right? Or just nervousness. I had to do a dark match. I don't know if it was in Georgia or where. I don't know where it was. I wrestled a friend of mine who I just got a text from last night. Jeff Bradley, right? We're doing TV and we had to do a dark match. And Vince and Lawler were at ringside during the dark match. And we could hear them talking. Obviously what a dark match is for you in a nation, whatever people don't know everything. It's not on the cameras. It's just a waste time, keep the crowd entertained, hopefully, before the cameras roll or in between changing something. But that was very intimidating, right? You're out there, Vince is there. Even though it's a dark match, you still want to do good, right? And Jeff won't let me live down that I left my boot prints on his face for quite some time. I think he bit down for a backdrop and I gave him a kick where I was supposed to get in the chest and I kicked him in the face. But accidents happen. It was all Vince McMahon. He made me nervous. But Vince was always cool. He'd walk around people and goof around. He wasn't stuck up or anything.
Yeah. Today's modern wrestling, you see more high-flying moves, which it seems like a lot of the wrestlers or care more about the pop than actually telling a story, in my opinion. But in your perspective, you're kind of considered a brawler. Do you think that there's anything that we've lost in professional wrestling, or do you think that we've actually gained in professional wrestling?
I think by saying you're a brawler is just a polite way of saying you're not very athletic, kid. Throw a punch. It looks okay. Yeah, I get it. I wasn't an athlete in school. I used to get before I was in ROTC and I had to do PE. I'd get in trouble for doing pro wrestling during wrestling class. But we're not gonna have none of that crap in here. But I don't know. I hate to criticize today's wrestling because some of it I love, some of it I don't. I think what I hate most about today's wrestling is some of the small things that are overlooked. Again, go back to punches. No one cares about
Right.
punches anymore, and you can somewhat blame the wrestlers, or you can blame the wrestlers because they should take pride in their work. They should be able to look back on what they do. Like I used to watch all my matches on TV. Just to see if I made mistakes or what I could do better the next time, or because sometimes a punch would look better from different camera angles, or if the wrong person's selling it, don't look as good. But I don't know. And a lot of it's the agents too, right? If I worked for
Right.
WWF or AEW and I was an agent for my like a certain match or to give guys advice, and they did some of the stuff they're doing with punches and kicks, even I'd have to call them aside. I wouldn't be allow myself to just sit there and, yeah, good job, boys. That was great. Give me another Mountain Dew. Or as Carl von Stroheim would say, Leo, get me another beer. But I'd have to call him and say, hey, look, guys, that was a good move. Great moonsault. Boy, perfect landing. But what about those punches? You just exposed the business to 683,000 people, AEW. You could be exposing the business to maybe 1.6 million if you threw a little better punches. We could give it an effort. It's worth
That's
trying.
true. That's
I
true.
think, though, and a lot of people will say, well, punching's illegal anyways. It shouldn't. But it's been in wrestling forever. And again, the art of wrestling is to make people second guess what they saw. Right?
That's it.
Logic tells you if you punch somebody in the face, you should be a red mark. And okay, we get that logic, but you can't use logic in wrestling. Logic tells you if you throw someone off the ropes, they're not going to come off, and you're going to drop down, and you're not going to jump over you and leapfrog you, and they're not going to, that's not logical either. But it's
Right.
accepted, and it should be because that's pro wrestling. But
Right.
punch is like it's the question, right? If you could throw a punch that looks real enough, people would say, man, I can't believe he's not bleeding. He nailed him. I swear he hit him, but there's no mark. It must have been fake. But I swear to God, he hit him. That's what you're supposed
Right.
to, let it make them doubt their
Absolutely.
own, make them question their own reality or whatever you call it, their own logic.
Right.
Because that's what wrestling is. Again, suspension of disbelief, as they call it. And God, man,
Right.
when you go back and watch Jerry Lawler against Bill Dundee or Terry Funk or Dory Funk and Harley and all those amazing matches where everything's crisp and clean, and Harley Race does that knee drop off the forehead where it looks like it just kills
Oh,
you. And I questioned one time, do you feel, because I used to be able to do that too. I learned how to do that as good as Harley, but it was okay. And there's a few guys that could do it good like that. Brian Blair, Paul Orndorff, Terry Funk,
yeah.
but Adrian Adonis. But Harley did it better than anybody. That jumping knee, right, where he'd bounce it off, looked like and you could be right there ringside, and it looked like he bounced it off. And Les Thatcher told me once I didn't feel a thing. That's the
No.
art. You could be
Yep.
sitting there going, holy crap, man. If you want to see the best knee drop ever, Harley Race Dusty Rhodes, Madison Square Garden. I think it was 1980, a rare appearance for the NWA Championship in Madison Square Garden. And Harley jumps, he's literally probably 4 feet above Dusty's head, and that knee comes right down in his head, and it looks like it bounced off. But Dusty survived. No mark. Guess what? Perfection.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But so that's
You.
again the importance. Moonsault's fantastic. Flippity dippity is great if you could do it. But the other stuff should be just as important to you as the wrestler. The agents are there. A lot of them are there just to collect a paycheck, and that's sad. But and a lot of them, their hands are tied, right? Like Tully Blanchard said when he was in AEW, hey, he'd give guys advice, they wouldn't listen. All right, I get it. You throw them the vine, they don't want to, throw them the
Right.
rope, they want to drown. That's fine. But God, from
Yeah.
the mindset of the Tony Khans and the guys that run the company, you think they'd want their product to be the best ever. Like I
You.
post those things just to be a jerk on, like when that Hobbs guy was punching his own forearm in slow motion. I realize that's me being an asshole, but my God, if the right person sees that and goes, holy crap, we didn't realize it was that bad. Let's fix it. Hey, Mr.
Right.
Hobbs, come over here. You got a good look. You're over with the people. Let's just fix this one thing. You're going to be even over more. God, how
Right.
much does it take you out of a match if guys are talking tough and you're into it? You're like, holy crap, I got to see these guys fight. And then they go start scrapping and they're throwing punches like LA Knight the other night or some other
Right.
guys. It takes you right out of the like, oh, come on.
Yep. It does. And Ric Flair's, he
Oh,
had
my
said,
God. He had one of the best punches ever.
well, and he said that him getting that good with his punches was something just as simple as tying a string
Right.
in his door, and every time he would pass it, he would punch it. He would practice. And
Yep.
he said finally he got to the point where he didn't hit the string, but it looked like he did. And
Right.
that's how he
And I can say I've been punched by Flair and you don't feel a thing. I've been punched by Jerry Lawler. You didn't feel nothing but the bump you took. That's the art, but it looked like it took your head off.
Now, how did again? You were also known for having the best punch in professional wrestling.
Wow.
How did you practice that punch for you to be able to get that good at the art?
I used to do the same thing. I didn't punch a string, but I walk around, like punch everything, like walk by a door, turn around, spin, punch it. And I did that since I was a kid, though. Before I even got wrestling, I was copying what I saw on
Right,
TV, and that's what I have a saying: watch, copy, perfect. Watch guys that do things right, copy how they do it, and perfect it as your own. And I used to watch like guys like Dick Murdoch, fantastic punches; Terry Funk, fantastic punches; Killer Carl Cox, fantastic punches; Jerry Lawler, the greatest puncher of all time, because he can throw punches every way possible. I mean, most guys throw a punch. Like Randy Savage had a great punch, but it was one way. He had a great jab too. But Jerry Lawler could go roundhouse, uppercut, straight to the jaw, lefts, rights, mounted punches, and they all looked amazing. So that to me is the greatest puncher of all time. When he was on, I mean, there's times when you throw a punch, you go, oh, geez, Jerry. But when he was on, man, when those matches with, again, Bill Dundee and Nick Black with unbelievable punches. But I just copied guys that I thought punched good. Like I said, Dick Murdoch had an amazing punch. Like threw a little Dick Murdoch in, and Lawler, and of course I do let Terry Funk forehead punch, and I don't know.
right.
But then you got to
Now,
be able to tell what's good too. Don't like
yeah.
I've had people tell me, "Oh, the Big Show throws a really good punch." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." I've had people tell me. Someone told me that Dustin Rhodes was the greatest puncher of all time. I don't remember who that was. No,
I
I'm
don't know
just kidding.
either.
Dustin does have a great punch, and I like to brag about that. I had Dustin's very first match ever,
Right,
and probably a second, third, and fourth too, and wrestled him many times. Dustin was one of the best. Is one of the best. Was always respectful to me and
right,
still is to this day on our interactions. Nothing but respect for Dustin and the legend he created. He had some shoes to fill, my God, and he did a good job of it. Great job. So is Cody.
right.
Cody, by the way, Cody has the best punch in the business right now. I think one of them. When he wants to throw it, man, it's good.
Right, right. Now, you once stated that you liked the daily aches and pains of wrestling because it meant you had accomplished something. Now
Yeah.
that we're older, so do you still feel that way? Because I'm sure we've talked about it. You hurt because of the business. Um, do you still look at it the same way as you did back then?
No. Well, I do when I do a show now. Like I still wrestle once in a while. Like I had a match back in May with the Cuban Assassin, one of my best friends I've known forever, and a guy named James Morris, and we did a show at a strip club in Tampa, and it was the most fun. It sounds silly, but the most fun lighting, kind of like this, which is probably why it was so much fun. No one could see us, but it was the most fun I'd had in years doing the wrestling, and it was one of the most bizarre, surreal things because it's a strip club. There's smoke in the air. The lighting literally was dim. There was music. They didn't shut the music down, which was great because they couldn't hear us giggling. But my mother-in-law, who's 85 years old, was there. My wife was there. My niece, who went to shows with me when she was a kid and would bring me my water and bring me my towel when she was 8, 10, 9 years old, right? She was at the strip club with her friend, and she's bringing me my water and my towel. And as even I told her, she's giving it, this is bizarre. Because, it's like the whole circle of life. But I had so much fun in that match. But when I got home that night, I was sore and hurting, but I had a smile on my face a mile wide because I had fun
Right,
and I knew I did what I set out to do and put the effort in, even though you could watch and go, it was nothing. But to me, it was.
right,
And as a young person, when I was wrestling, you get sore after the show, you put all your heart into it. But I miss those days, getting out of the car where you could barely get out of the car at 4 a.m. after a match with Rick Ryder, who no one probably heard of, but he's a guy who used to travel with me a lot for WCW. And God, we had so many fun matches here in Florida. We were the main events, semi-main events for years, cage matches, bull rope, any kind of match. He's my favorite opponent ever, Rick, as far as because we had bloodbaths and just so much fun. But we used to come home, sit in my hot tub, 2 a.m. together, and just talk about the match, hurting so bad you could barely get out. But you couldn't wait to do it again. It's a
right,
sickness. It's a
right,
sickness. Now, again, I don't like the pain today. I have
right,
problems getting up the steps. I have problems getting up if I sit down too long. And my neck's screwed up still from 30 years ago. And Matt Bourne, that asshole, and yes, Matt Bourne, folks, was an asshole, dropped me on my head in WCW. My neck's never been the same. But I hate that. I got numbness in my hands and my arms. I wouldn't change a thing. So I don't like the pain today. But back in the day, you felt you did something, because again, no matter your position in wrestling, that moment you're in the ring, in your mind unless you're thinking totally weird, you're somebody at that moment, right? Everybody's focused on you. Doesn't matter if they want to be, but they are,
Right.
God, I think back to like matches like when I wrestled Dustin Rhodes in Chicago. Dustin and I had great matches together all the time, but at house shows, right? When Bill Watts took over WCW, he actually asked me to teach his son, Eric. Bill Watts, by the way, is who gave that moniker of the best punch in wrestling. You realize that, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know that, but Bill Watts the one who started that. And I'm proud of that too, because that was, again, I know we're getting long here, but
No, you're good. You're good.
I was wrestling Van Hammer in Center Stage, and Van Hammer is still a friend of mine. So anybody who thinks Van Hammer didn't deserve this, didn't deserve that, kiss my ass, because he was offered an opportunity. And if you're offered the opportunity and you don't take it, what are you? You're an idiot. And he took the opportunity. You know why? Because he's not a freaking idiot. Anyone who thinks otherwise is the idiot. Van Hammer was a great guy. And anyways, I was wrestling. I just want to put that out there because a lot of people say, "Oh, Van Hammer, that's bad." He was offered an opportunity, had a great look, and he took it.
Right.
Boo-hoo. Get over it. Anyways, so I was wrestling Van Hammer, and after the match, I was upstairs getting a Pepsi because they didn't have Mountain Dew. But and Pee Wee Anderson, who was one of the referees at that time, he's dead too. Rest in peace, Pee Wee. He goes, "Cook, Watts wants to see you." And I was like, "Oh shit, what'd I do?" Because usually it meant that Bill was going to yell at you. Because I've heard him take guys in the other room and do what they should do today. Bill didn't do it out of hate or disrespect. He may have done it in a way people didn't like because no one likes to be talked down to when you're an adult, right?
Right.
But Bill did it out of love for the business. So if you're doing something he didn't think was right, and if he's the ruler of the roost at the moment, he's going to let you know, and he's going to do it loudly. And again, may not have been the right way to do it. I can't speak for Bill, but Bill was always cool to me. But anyways, the point is, I come down Center Stage in the hallway, and everybody's there. And Watts goes, "I want you guys to know something. This guy throws the best punch I've ever seen since my own." He threw that in there. He goes, "From now on, you're all going to sell the shit out of it, and the announcers are going to put it over." And then he called me to the side, and he goes, "Bob, I want you to teach my son Eric how to throw a punch." Then he called Eric and me into a little laundry area, and he goes, "Teach Eric how to throw a punch." So I worked with Eric then, and then occasionally when we'd see each other down the road and try to teach him how to punch. And Eric, again, another guy who was given an opportunity. Yeah, sure, his dad was the guy, but who cares? Nepotism's been in wrestling forever. And he's handled it like $1 million. Eric was always cool, respectful, did the best he could. Anyone who doesn't think so don't know the truth. But again, Bill Watts, I go back, I'm rambling again, but Bill Watts put me on house shows to work with Eric because Eric was green. So I worked some matches with Eric, but then I started working with Dustin on a couple of the house shows. And man, we had a match in Chicago. I'm just thinking back at that living in the moment, right? Where we're throwing the places packed, and probably wasn't packed. We like to say that, hanging from the rafters. Because this is probably 1991, so that probably isn't true. But they sounded like there was a bunch of people. I can't see without my glasses. Let's just assume. Right. But I'm throwing those punches and making that smack noise. And Dustin, who sold my punches like $1 million anyways, and that crowd is popping with like, oh, with every punch I'm throwing, and I'm the bad guy.
Right.
That's living in the moment because you're aware of it. You're like, oh man, they like that. Dustin, we got to do that again. Throw another one, in the pop. But anyways, yeah. So I always tell people that wrestling business, live in the moment because it's going to be over before you know it.
Right. Last two questions.
Uh-oh.
The first one, who is someone today that you think is going to be a major star in professional wrestling?
Oh man, that's hard. I don't watch it again. I don't watch a lot of AEW, so I know that Kyle Fletcher kid. He's amazing.
Yeah, he is.
And, I mean, they got a lot of amazing talent in AEW. Whether they're being wrangled in the right direction is not my call. Because I watch some of the stuff. I see that guy MJF. I thought, man, that kid for a while. I thought I was high on that guy. I thought, man, this guy's gonna be somebody. I think they've dropped the ball with him. He's just not as entertaining. They put him in programs just. The thumbtacks this past week and that stuff don't do nothing for me. And I'm not criticizing. Maybe I am. I don't know how you look at it, but it's just not my cup of tea. Now, again, if Terry Funk was doing it, I'd be like, oh my God, look at that. Terry's going through the thumbtacks. But, which, he did all that crazy stuff too back in the day. Flaming barbed wires. But Terry was crazy. We all know that. But in a good way. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I think Kyle Fletcher's amazing, but again, he just had neck surgery. That's a dangerous road to hoe when he's not a very old man. I don't know how old he is, but
Yeah.
I
think
think
with
Jade
Will,
Cargill's got a lot of potential. I don't care what anybody says.
yeah, I think Will Ospreay's the one that's having the neck surgery.
Who did I say?
You called uh Kyle Fletcher.
Oh no, I meant Will Ospreay. I'm
Ospreay.
sorry. I don't know
Yeah,
why I thought of Kyle because they looked alike for a while until that one kid
they
cut his
still
hair,
look
right?
alike. Yeah,
Oh,
he
okay.
does that.
No, I mean Kyle Fletcher's good too, but I was talking
Yeah,
about Will Ospreay. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I get him
Now,
confused. I'm old. I'm old sitting in a red light district.
the final question is this. I know you still get in the ring every now and then, but nothing like before. So, what do you miss most about your wrestling career from the younger years?
My friends. That's what I miss most. I mean, yeah, I love the wrestling part, but man, the road trips. We'd always travel, especially in WCW, Dave Penzer and Mike Thor and Rick Thames and classy Chris Nelson. And I don't want to leave anybody out. It was Sonny T and Chris Sullivan. I'm trying to think of the nasty Ned Brady, Robbie Otto, Rick Ryder. Man, so much fun we had on the road. Penelope Paradise went
Yeah,
on a lot of trips with me, not only in WCW, but other places. And she's one of my best friends still to this day. And man, I miss them in those times more than the after shows. Like I was talking to Mike, I reconnected with Mike Thor this week after years. And I'm telling him, do you remember the time we went to that bar and we told everybody you were Sting? Because Mike had been heavy set for his whole life, right?
right.
And then he had something in his personal life that clicked and he got in really good shape for a time and he had blonde hair like Sting and he looked a little like Sting without his makeup because he was in good shape. We went to a bar one night and we're like, yeah, it's Sting, and it's his birthday. And they thought we were telling the truth. And Mike goes, I have no memory of that. I said, well, and one of the girls that was with us chimed in on the post about Mike. And I said, weren't you there that night? Go, yeah, I was there. So I'm not telling a lie, but
Right.
Mike couldn't remember that. But there's just little things like that. We had so much fun. It was I think it was the same girl, Penelope Paradise, me and Mike. We were bar hopping one night in Atlanta and we went into a gay bar by mistake. We're sitting there at the bar and Mike leans over and he goes, hey, Bob, I think the bartender's a guy. He's dressed like a girl. What's going on? And we're just like, we're looking around and goes, hey, Mike, those two girls are kissing. And he's like, Bob, those two guys are kissing. And we're like, we're having so much fun, right? All three was like Penelope, me, Mike, and some other girl. We're just laughing. And we're like, yeah, fuck it. We just stayed. And one of us said we had to go to the bathroom. So we ended up going arm in arm to the bathroom and stuff. We were just having fun. So the point of my answer is I missed those
Right.
days and those times more. And me and Brian Pillman threw a guy in a dumpster one night coming out of a club in Atlanta called Club Anytime. At like 7 a.m. We were drinking all night and we're walking to the car and there was like beer bottles laying around. Some guy goes, hey man, pick up those beer bottles. And Brian's like, hey, they're not our bottles. Oh yeah. And the guy got smart and we threw them in the dumpster. That kind of stuff is what I miss most. The squeezy incident with Sid Vicious and Brian at the Ramada, when all the wrestlers got in a fight with a bunch of firemen at the Ramada, and Mike Graham's in the hallway in his underwear and cowboy boots yelling at a cop, we started it, or they started it, and we finished it, damn it. And just that stuff to me is the stuff I miss the most. I don't know.
Right.
I miss the wrestling too, but the friends.
Right.
And I see them once in a while, but it's not the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob, I appreciate you coming on so much. I only asked maybe 4 questions of the questions I had prepared.
What?
This was a great
That's
conversation.
depressing.
It's not depressing. That means this was a great podcast.
I don't think
I
even,
appreciate it, man.
I don't
really
think,
do. Go ahead.
yeah, I don't think he even made me cry about Evil. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Dodge that bullet.
I mean, we can revisit that.
Oh, well, there's one story that always makes me cry when I talk about Evil, but you've had enough of that.
Yeah. No, share it if you like.
Oh, geez. Well, it's like milking the drama, right?
Yeah.
There was during the end of Evil's life, he was suffering. Not only the end, but all the time I knew him, he was suffering. But he never let it show. He was a man, like he always said. I wear the big red, white, and blue on my shoulder because I think I'm the best in business. You have to think I'm the best, or you end up dead. And you have to be man enough to handle the circumstances. In his case, as he said, he was man enough, but he suffered greatly. Had a lot of major back pains. Had so many surgeries, and they had taken he was going to have a surgery to have a morphine drip type device put in his back where it would automatically shoot it into him so he wouldn't have to think about it because he would use the morphine lollipops and
Yeah.
There were times where I would call him and I'd be like, Evil, because he would answer the phone. It didn't even sound like him. I'd be like, is Evil there? And he goes, yeah, it's me. Because he was in so much pain.
Right.
And he was going in for this surgery. And my wife and I stopped to visit him at the hospital. We're in there talking to him. This is both a cool story and a depressing as all hell sad story, but at the same time, maybe kind of uplifting. I don't know. Because Evil always had a positive attitude, right? I always say, well, I hope you get better. Don't worry about it, Bob. I'll be okay. I always am, right? He always had a positive attitude. And that's one thing he always used to say, about, there's through every adversity, there's an equivalency to benefit if you just look for it. And that's his mindset in life. And every time he'd call our house, he'd ask to talk to my son. I'm going to talk to your son. He'd just ask my son, how you doing in school? He cared,
Right.
And so he's in the hospital and we're sitting there in the room and he's showing us his x-rays and he goes, this is what they're going to do. And he gave me the x-rays. He said, take the x-rays and put them online and get it through people's heads that don't do stupid stuff unless you're going to make a lot of money. Because his thing was, don't risk your life foolishly unless there's a big pot of gold at the end or you're an idiot. And it's basically, don't do stupid shit unless you're being paid. But he's showing us this, but then the nurses come in, right? This nurse comes in and she goes, Mr. Knievel, I wanted to know when it's a good time to introduce you to your new nurse. And he goes, well, I can tell you when it's not a good time, when I'm sitting here talking to my friends. And I was just like, I had a big smile on my face. And I was like, oh, idiot. And she just kind of walked out,
Right.
But that's, again, back another story. We went to visit Evel once and he was doing a documentary and we're at his bus. He had a big tour bus and there's a security guard standing there because we were going to visit him. I was going to show him the motorcycle I just bought. And we go up to the security guy and we said, is Evel here? And he goes, who are you? And Evel looks out the door and goes, hey, you two, get your shoes off and get your asses in here. And we just looked at the security guard like, But anyways, because he liked to take his shoes off. He had marble floors in his bus. Like to point those things out. He lived in luxury. But anyways, we're at the hospital and he's showing me the x-rays and he's talking and he goes, Bob, I don't know what to do anymore. He says, I'm in so much pain. This is the last chance I'm going to get to have any kind of quality of life. And then he got really depressed and he goes, I'm nothing anymore. I'm just an old man. Man. And it hit me right there, man. I was like holding back the tears like you couldn't believe, this guy you put on a pedestal. That's how he feels, And I said, Evel, in my eyes, you're always going to be that guy on the cover of Sports Illustrated waiting to take on the world. And he just looked at me and he shook my hand. He goes, Bob, you have no idea what it means to hear you say that right now. And so, yeah, I always cry when I tell that story. But, man, when I left that room, I broke down like a sissy you never saw because, this is a guy that you've always been positive and seeing him in that position where he was that down. You just knew what was he going through when he wasn't around anyone to talk to, I mean, Jesus.
Right.
But yeah, so I didn't cry as much as I usually do, but I got tears right here. You can't see because I'm in the red light district, so as I said.
Well, look, Bob, you are my Evel Knievel.
Jeez.
You are.
Evel's, wait a minute, wait. Evel's turned over in his grave. I can wait.
You've been a lot to me. You've been a lot to me back before I knew you. I cherish our friendship. It means the world to me that you came on the podcast and you opened up the way you did. It means the world to me that you come on Tuesday nights. Our Tuesday nights are my favorite nights with you because you never know what you're going to say.
Oh.
We always laugh. So I appreciate everything you've done, regardless of what you think about your wrestling career. I think you are a true legend. I think you are a trailblazer. You have made it to the Hall of Fame in Florida. There's a lot of people who absolutely love you, not just for what you've done in wrestling, but because of who you are. So thank you so much for everything you've done for me. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate those words. And I would like to say I did get a very cool ring from Champ Pro Wrestling out of Jacksonville from Mr. Larry Hamilton Sr. But as far as my wrestling, how I look at it, it was the absolute best times of my life, no matter what. I'm not bitter in any way, shape, or form, no matter how anybody may have took what I said tonight. I'm not bitter at all. Best time of my life.
Yeah. Guys, if you want to see more of Bob Cook, again, subscribe to our podcast. He's on every Tuesday with us at 7:30 p.m. Central. We will be doing a recap tomorrow night, matter of fact, of Raw, which I get to go watch as soon as we get done with this.
It almost sounded like you were going to announce the OnlyFans site and see more about Cook.
I mean, look, guys, I'm sure if you guys, reach out to Bob enough, we can get him.
I'll have to pay them. Kind of the reverse gimmick. I'm no Mandy Rose, unfortunately.
Oh, man. Anyway, guys, you have a great week. And again, Bob, thank you so very much, my friend. I will see you tomorrow night. Please subscribe to the podcast, guys, and join us tomorrow night for our episode of the recap of Monday Night Raw. Good night, everyone.